opens, and Nell appears, who comments on how quickly she has returned. He explains that the assignment was simple, and immediately wonders why one of the beastmen possessed a blood flow suppression device. The beastman sits nearby while the attacker. The man's eyes widen when he sees Kane's reflection approaching with intent. He panics as Kane approaches. Kane immediately tells him to stop pretending with a sinister smile. The moment he lunges, the attack hits the beastman before he can react. The man's head falls to the ground instantly. The others react with panic and alarm, as Kane calmly explains that his presentation was only delayed because someone interfered. He takes off his hat and formally introduces himself as his new housemaid. The beast woman explodes in anger and charges directly at Kane with her drawn sword. Kane responds to her attack with his own and makes her fall backwards towards his group. She yells at him again, refusing to let him end up there. The whole group jumps on him at once, ready to attack together. Everyone pounces on him in a storm of weapons and movement. He blocks and redirects them as she is thrown upwards by the chaos. Take a look behind him. Nell watches without intervening as one of her own struggles to contain the fight. An enraged beastman charges at Kane with a wild scream. Kane blocks the incoming blow as his sword breaks. Kane calmly explains that the man who was attacked earlier was actually a spy. The beast woman rejects the accusation, insisting that the man could not be a spy. Nerd asks him the reason for his suspicion, and he asks if he knows the Jepril school. He explains that the school specializes in physical magic, and that this particular technique belongs to them. He reveals that the spy was using body transformation magic as the corpse begins to transform. The group recoils in shock as they witness the dead man's face change to an unknown one. Kane explains that a special stone was implanted into the spy's body, allowing him to perfectly mimic someone else's mana. Nell hears that the man was sent by Atla and accepts that Kane only acted because he was sure. He then asks him how he managed to see through a Jepril magic technique despite being a swordsman. He also asks why the spy's identity was kept instead of warning them. Kane says that the first question has an easy answer and reveals that he knows everything about the continent's 73 magic schools. Kane says the second answer is complicated and blames his tendency to act compulsively. Remember how Ryan shaped Kane's fate so that his malice was directed only at evil targets. He admits that now, every time he feels the evil, his body moves on its own. Later, on the second floor of the inn, Nerd asks her to explain herself before acting the next time. Kane apologizes and promises to control himself better during the mission. Nerd still thanks him for what he did and says that he will ask the princess for a reward for him. He tells her that he is currently praying on the top floor. Panic takes hold of her as she lunges forward, screaming for the princess. A sudden revelation hits her as she remembers who was responsible for preparing the altar. He runs into the chamber and finds the princess standing there. Relief sets in briefly when they are seen to be safe. Sia asks if the lower floors have been attacked, and Nell says it's a little more complicated than that. Sia points out that only a handful of people could really threaten her. Ready at the moment. He regrets that the attackers did not survive, as capturing them could have revealed more useful information. Then he feels for sure that there is still an enemy somewhere nearby. Although the presence has been carefully erased, he trusts his perception under the moonlight. Without hesitation, she runs towards the threat, while Nell follows in a panic. Nell realizes that the only one capable of erasing her presence at this moment is Kane. He points out that Full Moon's power is rivaled by that of the Beast King at his peak. Nell runs ahead, terrified that Kane won't be able to resist the strength of the unprotected princess. Kane blocks the princess' sudden attack without flinching, and notices that she is stronger than he expected. Sia is frozen with shock when she realizes that she has hit Kane. He apologizes while Nell recovers mentally from what she has just witnessed. Nell remembers that not even the Beast King could have stopped that blow so easily. His thoughts conclude with the terrifying possibility that Kane will surpass even the Beast King. Kane informs him that Hale had been a spy all along, and relates it to the magic that was hiding his true nature. It is explained that his power to read fate works as long as he can look directly at the person. He clarifies that his ability depends on sensing a person's unique mana. Kane reflects on how no one can hide their mana from the priestess' sight, and acknowledges that her detection ability is so strong that it seems unfair. Nell berates her in shock for revealing sensitive information, but insists to herself that her life matters more than protecting a state secret. Nell sighs and warns Kane that what she heard is confidential. Kane remains silent, leading them to call him by his name in confusion. Kane stands up and tells them that there is a danger approaching. He tells them that the enemies have surrounded the entire area. Meanwhile, enemies positioned in the distance are wondering why their ally reported so late. Ratman looks irritated as he rants about how Hale should have taken the job seriously. Racid explains that they do not need to take care of Jail, as the transformation magic is risky enough to kill its user. Jail shuts Ratman up when he laughs at Razzle's trick. Ratman tries to play hard to get with Jail, but Jail claims that the spy infiltrated a long time ago and has not returned. They both ask him furiously to their commander permission to kill the other while they clash heads. The commander says that anyone who lands a sword in front of him will be killed. Kane notices the lethal intent radiating from the rank 12 enemy. Racid orders Hale to notify the others and warns that if a report does not arrive soon, they will move forward with the mission. Ratman eagerly prepares, excited that the operation is about to begin. He turns to Racid to get some kind of affirmation. Her face twitches in shock as she realizes that something is terribly wrong. He panics and tries to warn Jail that they are without making attacked. He turns around and sees Hale already being motionless on the rooftop. Ratman looks ahead confused, trying to understand what just happened. Kane appears to Ratman, who panics and demands answers. He screams again, demanding to know if Kane caused the massacre. Kane remains calm while Ratman insists on being recognized. Kane then appears behind him and questions if Ratman even counts as a person. Coldly reduces the enemy to nothing but meat while taking him down. Ratman's body falls to the ground as Kane nonchalantly cleans his sword. He inspects the sword with satisfaction, seeing it as a reliable tool for the next few days. Meanwhile, Nell calmly announces that their base must be abandoned now that the enemy has discovered them. He orders the others to leave no trace and to carry only what is necessary. Kane eventually returns to the base and enters where the others gather. Nell begins to ask if he counted the enemies and noticed the commander's appearance, which leaves him confused. She explains that it's important to know who they're fighting, but he doesn't seem sure why that information is necessary. He nonchalantly reveals that there is no enemy left to study because he has already annihilated them. She looks at him in disbelief, still trying to process what she has accomplished. His attention is diverted to the sword, and he admits that he simply took the blade as a trophy after defeating its owner. She freezes over when they find out that she unknowingly killed the sacred magic swordsman. He explains that the man he defeated was Racid, a powerful executive known for his magic sword. He adds that it is said that the sword can cut anything, which makes him smile. She jumps out of surprise when he admits that he has no idea about swords. Nell starts to tie up ends and thinks that maybe he's not a swordsman at all, but a sudden burst of light suspends her thoughts. The desired transformation is completed and calmly announces that it is ready. He thanks Kane for the scouting effort and takes command of the situation. When he offers to take care of the attackers, she refuses and insists that they cannot depend on him anymore. He indifferently explains that he has already deleted everyone, which leaves her frozen and not knowing how to respond. In a dark place far away from them, a report arrives that Racid's communication has suddenly stopped. An Atla executive named Banda stepped forward in disbelief at the news. He insists that Racid should never have lost to the Beast King's royal guard, given their strength close to rank 7. The subordinate reports that Sia possesses a bloodline that is rumored to surpass even that of the Beast King. They discuss how dangerous the Beastman's instincts would be combined with awakened blood. The girl decides to confirm everything through her intelligence network. Van asks what their next move should be, as they need a new plan after Racid's failure. She reveals that they had already prepared a contingency plan. Van laughs, leaves her with his team, and shifts his focus to another task. The next day, Kane walks through the ruins of the forest on the outskirts of the village. She remembers agreeing to separate from the two girls and regroup the next morning. He arrives 2 hours early and decides to reflect in silence while he waits. He starts meditating and remembers how the body and the mind followed each other in a cycle. Ryan challenges him to find out which of the two really leads. Your first task, and offering him a discounted fortune reading. He refuses and backs away, while she insists on taking him towards her stall. He changes tactics by mentioning a famous priestess who can see fate itself. A girl timidly approaches and asks to meet this mysterious person, requesting a glimpse into her own fate. The girl explains that she can read the destinies of others, although her own remains hidden from her. Cain looks at the girl's ears and instantly recognizes her as someone from the Silver Fox clan. She approaches and asks him if his ears and tail seem strange to him, while he leans slightly and apologizes for staring. She assures him that she has not been offended as he approaches. He leans in with a playful smile, suggesting that he might actually be interested in her. He enthusiastically imagines that their meeting could be fate, and even offers to pay the cost if they read the fortune together. But Cain calmly refuses. She insists that there is nothing more, and admits that she is nervous about having her fortune read to her alone in a new place. She adds that he seems as curious about his own fate as she is, but he rejects her again. She decides to leave too, passing by the divine who watches as both clients walk away. The girl's guard observes the divine and wonders if she should intervene, but the girl downplays it and insists that it was she who crossed the line. Her guard calls her and points out that the scammers are using the priestess's title to profit. The princess says that there is no point in reacting and admits that she is more curious about the man she met earlier. He explains that he is curious because he could not read his fate at all. She admits that, even for her, her existence is a complete mystery. He remembers not having seen anything in him, as if his fate was completely blank. Her guard suggests that they try to delve into their fate, but the princess refuses and nonchalantly says that they are destined to meet again anyway. Later, Cain and the princess use their tickets for the same train route. The princess recalls that Cain strangely reminded her of an old man she met by chance a decade ago. His guard speculates whether the old man could be the thief related to a legendary treasure. Despite knowing that he is a villain, the princess admits that the old man's lesson about fate still resonates in her mind. He feels that he will definitely cross paths with Cain again. As Cain moves forward, he clearly remembers the princess's face and wonders if she is the same person his grandfather once mentioned. His grandfather had explained to him that 3 stars influence Cain's fate, and that one of those stars belongs to a priestess of the Silver Fox clan who could read fate. He also remembers that he was warned that this priestess would one day beat his heart. What confuses him is that she did not behave like an opponent. He wonders if her reaction means that his fate is leaning towards something more neutral. He recalls that his grandfather said that many people were destined to end their lives, but when he counts the minor fates, the number of threats exceeds 100. He swears to nullify each of those fates in order to survive. The capital welcomes travelers with a grand entrance and an ancient statue of a knight. He arrives and approaches someone in the city, while looking for a specific person. He explains that the person he is looking for supposedly works at this place. He mentions the blacksmith Cal, which causes the worker to react with sudden alarm. He presents a long wooden box as his sostituto to make an appointment. She asks about the object, while he explains that it must be delivered directly. He says that if Cal refuses to meet, even after receiving the object, he will leave without causing problems. The girl cocks her head in confusion, wondering if she has misunderstood something. She apologizes to check on the situation, while Cain silently notes that the ring judged her as pure. A red-haired man enters sighing and mutters that Emmy is too kind to troublesome customers. He rants about how he should kick out irritating people, while Cain realizes that this man carries a black aura. Cain thinks the man looks evil enough to deserve immediate punishment. The man shouts that if Cain wants to see Cal, he should pay properly instead of using tricks. He teases by saying that someone like Cain would never have that much money, while Cain calmly replies that he wouldn't buy his guns, even if he could. Cain replies that there is no point in buying a sword that cannot withstand his power. The man challenges Cain to show his strength, stating that he can take responsibility. Cain's eyes get sharper as he teases the man, asking him if he really thinks he deserves the title of Heart of Iron. Cain then points out a cheap sword that the man can take responsibility for. The man bursts out in anger as Cain nonchalantly picks up the sword. Kane explains that, despite its striking exterior, the blade is of poor quality and perfect for someone like the man. Kane's calm reaction proves that it was the man who placed the fake sword to deceive inexperienced buyers. With a simple command, he demonstrates the weakness of the sword. The blade shatters instantly under the force. The shop assistant looks on in disbelief as Kane asks if he intends to take responsibility for the mangled gun. The shop assistant is stunned that a replica can be broken so easily and wonders how Kane managed it. A voice comments that something unusual seems to be happening in the store. Cal enters with them hiding behind him and demands an explanation for the disaster. The shop assistant panics as he points to the mangled weapon, trying to justify that Kane broke one of the swords in the store. He frantically demands that the guards be called until Cal's cold order silences him. Cal steps forward and asks why a worthless object was allowed into his workshop. He fixes the clerk with an angry look and demands an answer. The shop assistant stutters in panic, while Cal notices that the man's nervous reaction already reveals the truth. He declares that he finally understands how the rumors about defective weapons began to spread. He announces that what has happened is too serious to ignore. Cal warns the shop assistant that he will face serious consequences for damaging the store's reputation. The man is grabbed by two blacksmiths and dragged away despite their desperate protests. The shop assistant starts accusing Kane of insulting Cal's sword and questioning its quality. Cal yells at him and tells him that he will take care of the troublemaker later. Cal then turns to Kane and asks if the allegations are true. Kane calmly admits that everything said was true. Cal says that he had high hopes when Kane brought Ryan's souvenir, but he returns the object to him and suggests that they both forget what happened. Kane catches the branch and realizes it was in the box. Cal reluctantly throws a sword at him as a reward. Kane examines the weapon without reacting, provoking irritated comments about its price and value. Calmly, take up the sword. He draws it out and admits that his previous words may have sounded harsh. He explains that he never intended to, of insulting the blacksmiths, and that he only ascertained one fact. It proves that even renowned blades shatter under his power when he wields it. The demonstration surprises the blacksmith, who watches in disbelief as the cut unfolds. The blade shatters in midair as he completes his strike. Kalmira with wide open eyes, amazed that the sword broke without any mana behind the attack. He watches Kane remain impassive and calls the situation incredible. Cal covers his face in disbelief as he realizes that the boy's brute force alone shattered the sword. With a nervous laugh, she apologizes and admits that she was wrong to belittle someone of Ryan's lineage. Kane also gently apologizes, but Cal downplays him and reminds him that he only told the truth. As they sit together, Cal asks why Kane has come, pointing out that the mistletoe branch must mean something serious. Kane explains that his grandfather forbade him to open the box and asks if the branch is really valuable. Cal smiles and says how precious is an understatement, calling her such a rare treasure that she roses the divine. Kane almost chokes on her drink as she processes the idea of her being divine. Cal explains that despite its weak aura, the branch turns into a top-tier divine leaf once forged. He remembers how he tried to convince Ren to let him forge something with the branch decades ago. Kane surprises him by calmly asking if he could make a gun for him instead. Kane tells him that for some reason he can't handle metal. He explains that all the famous weapons he tries to fistfight break long before he can use them properly. He reflects on how almost all the weapons in the world depend on metal, which makes his situation almost hopeless. Cal contemplates the boy's condition and compares it to the features of a legendary sea creature. Then he realizes why Ren entrusted him with the branch after hearing about the boy's unusual nature. Ken's face lights up at the possibility of finally having a sword for himself, and Cal assures him. As Kane leaves the workshop, he silently acknowledges that he had almost given up on having a proper weapon. As the workers around him panic, they decide that the safest thing to do is to inform Cal as soon as possible. Annie offers to deliver the report, but she suddenly freezes over when she runs into Kane. Kane wonders aloud if the red-haired shop assistant has mysteriously disappeared. The workers frantically bow to him as they apologize for letting the rude man get away. They promise to track him down and punish him properly. Kane remembers that he was mistaken for a powerful teacher from the distant fourth continent. Most of the masters of that continent are eccentric, except for a single sane sword god. He politely tells Emmy to lift his head, which gives him a moment of relief before he notices something unexpected. The workers look in front of them and wonder where Kane has disappeared. Suddenly, a violent ambush breaks out when several attackers pounce on Kane. A confused attacker asks about the reward just before being quickly taken down. Kane takes advantage of the opening that the man never realized he had left. His sword shatters as another attacker makes his way towards his bare back. Kane dismisses him as merely a low-level threat. He grabs the attacker's axe and then brandishes it towards the others. One of them screams in terror as the white-haired man pounces laughing. Kane steps on it immediately, amused by the sword he's holding. The hooded man screams, calling for his captain as Kane attacks. Raiding mobs attack at the same time, hitting from all angles. A surge of power bursts outward, distorting the air as the attack swirls. In the blink of an eye, bodies fly out behind him. The rest of the men stand transfixed and trembling as Kane approaches. The surviving thug desperately claims he acted under threat, insisting his family would have been killed if he refused. Kane approaches and offers to spare his life if he responds with the truth, which only makes the man more panicked. He presses the leaf against his own finger and swears on it to show that he is sincere. A sword oath is a deadly vow that limits mana and can kill a master if broken. Kane raises his shining sword in the air and promises again that honesty will save the man's life. He calmly prepares his question while the trembling man waits. His eyes turn red as he leans in and demands to know who sent the attackers. The bully silently kneels down, overwhelmed with fear. The man screams as the blade digs into him, and Kane demands an answer through the pain. He turns the gun without hesitation, and another scream starts. Trembling, he finally drops the name behind the attack, confirming Kane's suspicion. When asked about the chain of command, he admits that the request came through a large group connected to the culprit. Kane realizes that the red-haired shop assistant he suspected had links to organized crime from the very beginning, and understands why his past actions seem strange to him. Pressed again, the man tries to explain that there are many branches. Finally, he reveals the specific place where he works and firm where the request was transmitted. Kane leans in to confirm that there is no deception, and the man frantically insists that he is telling the truth. After observing him, Kane acknowledges that he seems to be honest. When the man tries to leave, Kane declares that despite the truth, he still intends to kill him. The man screams in disbelief as Kane explains that the sword oath does not apply to him. When he was a child, he consumed a heavenly fruit that cut the mana itself and broke the rules. Rules that once bound swords and oaths. The man begs desperately as he reminds Kane of the value of a warrior's promise of pride. Kane recognizes that honor matters, but only when it's shared among deserving warriors. He attacks without hesitation and proves that the promises made to the villains do not have any weight. The sword shatters immediately. Walking away from the bodies he has left behind, he reflects that what he really needs is a sword that will never break. The Leon resting place looks peaceful from the outside, but the appearance is only true for the facade and the lobby. A hidden passage leads to the depths of the building. Under the surface, it functions as a meeting place for violent criminals who brag about their work. Among them, a chained child sits quietly near the tables. Suddenly, heavy footsteps hit the ground in frustration. The red-haired shop assistant named Dean storms in, angry that his men failed to eliminate Kane. His anger changes its target. He turns to an infamous masked figure and admits that he would have waited if he had known the man was coming. Dean calmly asks if the man plans to act immediately. The man clarifies that his only order was to retrieve the information from Ironheart. Dean panics inside as he wonders if the man intends to take the information and silence him afterwards. When the man calms him down, Dean reluctantly hands him the object he had been hiding. Dean panics when he sees him leaving and worries about losing his protection. The man scolds him sharply and points out how eerily quiet the surroundings have become. Outside, the child innocently asks if he can open them already, since he is still covering his eyes. Kane politely tells him to keep them closed a little longer. He comforts the child and tells him that he can sleep until he is returned safely to his mother. Kane looks back when he hears Dean's voice. The masked man realizes that Dean knows Kane when he points out that Kane is the one who humiliated him. The man examines the consequences and comments on how cruel Kane is for someone so young. Kane repeats the word with sharp disbelief. He scoffs at the idea that someone like that man can even understand what cruelty means. He remembers how he simply beheaded the man, bragging about doing the same to others, and tortured the torturers until they died. The man argues that one should have had mercy on the weak, which causes madness to flash in Kane's eyes when he asks why. 4. He argues that because his enemies were weak, he was told that showing mercy should have been enough. Remember a lesson intended to define good and evil. He declares that piety has no place for people like them as he prepares his sword. He offers nothing but infinite malice with the child still in one arm. He provokes the man by asking him what sin he carries and whether his head should roll like that of the latest victims. A sudden blur of movement pounces on him before life. So that I can react. The man freezes from the shock, realizing that he didn't even see Kane brandish his sword. The blade breaks right when making contact. Dean screams when he sees how everything is unfolding before him. Kane warns the man not to move, to have a cleaner death. The injured man finally falls inert at his feet. Kane smiles maniacally when he turns to Dean and announces that they are the only ones left. Dean's desperate scream rings out as his eyes fill with tears. Night falls on the fortress wall. The boy rests in silence while Kane mutters that Dean was working for the enemy organization. He studies the little chip Dean was getting ready to deliver before everything fell apart. Kale examines the chip and observes that it looks dated, and Kane explains that the design is deliberately old as a security measure. Kane replies that he will discover the information that Alta stole from his workshop. It will take time. Kane gets frustrated because they still have no idea what Atla is planning. Kane urges him to be cautious, as they still do not know Atla's intentions. Cal finally asks about the sleeping child, and Kane explains the situation to him, asking Cal if he can take care of the child for a while. Cal agrees to take it, pointing out that things are too unstable to trust the local guards. As Kane prepares to leave, Cal suddenly stops him. He reveals to her a scroll that he discovered inside the mistletoe box, hidden in a secret compartment. He thinks the letter was meant for Kane, and was probably written by Ryan. Kane accepts her and tells Cal that he will get in touch once he finds a device that can read the data chip. He turns around, saying he will leave for now. Elsewhere, the girl wonders who could show such overwhelming power against Atlas. He asks if the mysterious fighter could be an ally. His guardian concludes that the unknown fighter is terrifyingly brutal, and that even as an ally, he would be no cause for celebration. The princess admits that the mystery fighter went a little too far in how he handled things. He looks up as he tries to remember where he's seen such ruthless tactics before. Then he smiles at the thought of reinforcements arriving from distant continents. Her guardian muses that others might be fighting their own battles against Atlas somewhere in secret. The princess removes her mask as she diverts the conversation back to the unknown ally. He expresses his desire to get to know this person and confirm his intentions. Night falls over the city, while Kane wonders when Ryan could have prepared all this. Read the letter explaining that Rain predicted that he would reach the central continent and meet Kale. As she squeezes the letter, she wonders how her grandfather could foresee even the priestess who sees fate. The next line reveals that his confrontation with Atla and Barakal was also anticipated. Kane is sitting at his desk when the message declares that he is destined to die at the hands of Atla. In the Heavenly Machine District, he walks down the street, feeling the weight of exhaustion. Reflect on how exhausted your body feels without mana, as people with mana stay energized and recover quickly. Kane approaches the merchant and asks for a device, but the merchant reminds him that it is a very old product. Kane keeps walking and realizes that this store is the last place he could have it yet. He comes in hoping they still have what he needs. Moments later, the princess and her guardian arrive and also enter the store. They ask the shopkeeper about the item they came for. The old man enthusiastically recognizes the device they are referring to and explains that the last one was sold to someone else not so long ago. The princess is stunned to hear that he is no longer there. Her guardian pulls her aside and points out that no normal buyer would bother with such an outdated device. They decide that the only option is to track down who bought it, so the princess turns to the shopkeeper. He tries to charm the old man, acting with enthusiasm to see the rare device. She sweetly asks if she can share something about the person who bought it. Cain inserts a small device into the side of a tablet. He watches in surprise as a holographic screen lights up in front of him. The screen reveals a detailed plan outlining Atlas' intention to seize the Ironheart weapons and kidnap Cal and his daughter. Alarmed, he decides he needs to warn Cal immediately, but is suddenly interrupted. The priestess runs up to him enthusiastically, recognizing him from the harbor. He wonders why she has appeared now, while she insists that he should remember her. She realizes that her guardian is behind her as she admits that she would have cried if he had said that he did not remember her. His attention is directed downwards when she approaches. She leans over and looks at him in confusion, worried that his fate is still unreadable to her. Her guardian urges her to concentrate, while she continues to inspect him too intensely. The princess suddenly leans over and bluntly asks him if he is a member of Atla. He calmly explains that he is not part of Atla, and even opposes them. She celebrates her hunch as a man approaches, and reveals himself to be the one who had set the trap. He appears in sight, and recognizes her as the princess of the second continent. Her guardian reacts instantly, and protects her when she identifies the man as an Atla executive. The crowd panics at the mention of Atla, and rushes to flee the scene. The intruder taunts them as he advances, only to receive a warning to stay away. The man changes his tone, and demands to know why they came to the central continent. He himself answers her question, pointing out that buying the old device means they were investigating Atlas. A sudden vibration arises from Cain's tablet, catching the group by surprise. The man realizes that the princess was not the one who bought the old device. Cain calmly picks up the tablet, and asks if it was used to track them, and the man admits that it was placed in the store to attract anyone who opposed his group. The man laughs proudly as he explains that the trap allowed them to catch someone valuable. The man then asks if Cain is related to the princess, and Cain insists that he is just a passerby with. One of his followers pulls out a large speaker-like device. He announces the beginning of the show as the princess's guardian instinctively steps forward to protect her. The villain presses a button and activates the device. A deafening pulse bursts from the speakers. The princess collapses in agony as the man proudly declares that the attack is the power of his beast anti-man weapon. Cain watches as the device continues to emit pulses, recognizing it as a weapon specifically designed to harm the beastmen. The man teases them with a wild laugh, while promising that he will wake up in a hidden prison. The guardian collapses on the floor with a groan. The princess falls to her side as she apologizes in a dazed panic. Cain watches everything in silence. The man turns his attention to him, and prepares to take care of him next. Cain listens as he is told to cooperate, and follows him to be interrogated, which makes him realize that he is about to be taken to his base. The man takes out some handcuffs, and says he is in a very good mood after capturing the princess. Cain smiles smugly as he agrees to cooperate for now. The keeper wakes up shivering in the dark, struggling to get in. Understand where he is. Look for the princess, and try to move despite the pain and the ties that hold her. She recognizes the iron handcuffs while Cain calls her. He explains that the princess was taken away a few moments ago. Panic takes over her as she realizes that the attackers were successful, and no guard was called to stop them. The guardian notices Cain's handcuffs, and he confirms that the attackers are planning to take away his sword. He declares that the sword is irreplaceable and decides that he will face them himself. As he gets up, she urgently points out to him that they are both completely immobilized. He calmly points out that no matter how special the handcuffs are, they are still made of metal. In a sudden burst of strength, he shatters the bonds with brute force. He comes over and tells her to stay still while he works quickly to free her. She watches in disbelief as her own wives fall apart at her feet. The princess steps aside while Cain interrogates the enemy. He tells her to wait outside as he refuses to let her see what's going on. She obeys and closes the heavy door behind her. Nero calls to her with relief the moment she enters the hallway. The princess runs and hugs Nero tightly. Their reunion is interrupted by screams that resonate violently from inside the interrogation room. Nero quietly asks who Cain is and what he might want. Cain finally comes out and apologizes for the delay, urging them to leave faster. When asked about the prisoner, he casually states that the man is dead. Nerl insists on confirming it herself despite his warning. Kane warns him that if he insists, he will regret it. Inside the cell lies a mangled corpse so brutal that it makes her recoil. Later, the group reaches a cliff and realizes that the enemy hid their base out of sight. He decides that this place is safe enough from persecution and asks them to stop for a moment. He hands them a blueprint that reveals the device that disabled them. Both girls react with alarm once they recognize what the diagrams mean. He explains that the weapon was specifically designed to attack the beastmen by disrupting their internal energy flow. Nell bites her lip, disturbed that such a thing even exists. The girls bow in gratitude, but he downplays it, saying that he has his own reasons for helping. His expression hardens as he announces that he has discovered Atla's true target. He reveals that Atla intends to bring down the entire central continent. He explains that destroying it would break the peace treaty of the 4 continents, and with chaos unleashed everywhere, the group plans to start a world war. After exhausting each nation's army through endless conflicts, Atla aims to take full control. The 2 women look on in disbelief as the scale of the plan hits them. Kane finally understands why he was once warned that Atla could cost him his life. He tells them that he must now act on his own, and they start convincing him to go to their base so they can thank him properly. Kane refuses because he needs to prepare, as Atla could attack Iron Art at any time. The princess gently stops him and asks if he can at least promise that they will meet again. She arranges a meeting for tomorrow at a tavern in the central district. Kane accepts and leaps away effortlessly, leaving them stunned at how skilled he really is. Nell tenses up at the thought that Kane's strength could rival that of the Beast Kings. The princess suddenly wonders aloud if her meeting with him was written by fate. At dusk, Kane finally arrives at Cal's house. Cal opens the door and hears that the contents of the data chip have been decoded. He covers his face with his hand, shocked by what Atla had been planning. By the fire, Kane explains that Atla intends to start a war and will attack Iron Art to stoke it. When asked if hiding is an option, Cal gets up and says they could never avoid being found. He adds that, as Kane attacked the Atla base, he is now being hunted relentlessly. Kane apologizes, but Kane downplays it and blames the mistletoe branch's pressure. He promises that the sword will be finished, but that a problem is still looming. He explains that a rare metal from the 2nd continent can neutralize the mistletoe branch and is crucial to completing the sword. He admits that metal is difficult to obtain, but Kane suggests that there may be a way to get it quickly. The next day at the tavern, he shares a meal with the girls and brings up the subject of rare metal. Kane asks if the princess can get it as soon as possible. She calmly explains that getting the metal is possible, but it will take time, while she looks at Nerl. When you are told that the material does not need to be processed, you immediately realize that it can be obtained instantly. She firmly demands Nerl's sword, but her guard pleads with her that she cannot lose something so precious. After a tense pause, the sword is reluctantly placed on the table. Kane calmly offers to share everything he knows without hesitation. Sia looks at him askance as she wonders why he is being so generous. She leans over and bluntly asks him what he's really after. Kane shrugs and admits that he simply wants to work together. Sia bursts out in surprise when she realizes that he is proposing an alliance. Kane explains that dealing with Atlas requires allies he can rely on before he prepares to leave. Sia tries to stop him, panicked, and hands him a map of her inn. Suddenly, he grabs her wrist with something else on his mind. He introduces himself warmly and tells her his name. Kane realizes that he hasn't introduced himself yet and decides that his first name will do. Sia sees him leaving and mutters that his name suits her. Kane sits in front of the 2 girls, while Sia asks him if he really trusts them. He calmly replies that yes, insisting that he can tell at a glance that they have no bad intentions. He adds that if they doubt him, he cannot force them to think otherwise. Kane tells them he's not sure how long this partnership will last, but he hopes they can work together for now. Kane wields his sword and prepares to leave as everyone says goodbye. Under the moonlight, Cal looks in disbelief at the sword that Kane handed to him. He remembers Cal's promise that his new sword would be ready in a week and the thought of wielding a sword that will never break fills him with excitement. Upon arriving at the village, Cain tries to remember the exact location he was given. He says the coded password exactly as instructed, and a voice from inside recognizes him and tells him to come in. The door opens and Nell appears, who comments on how quickly she has returned. He explains that the assignment was simple, and immediately wonders why one of the beastmen possessed a blood flow suppression device. The beastman sits nearby while the attacker. The man's eyes widen when he sees Cain's reflection approaching with intent. He panics as Cain approaches. Cain immediately tells him to stop pretending with a sinister smile. The moment he lunges, the attack hits the beastman before he can react. The man's head falls to the ground instantly. The others react with panic and alarm as Cain calmly explains that his presentation was only delayed because someone interfered. He takes off his hat and formally introduces himself as his new housemaid. The beast woman explodes in anger and charges directly at Cain with her drawn sword. Cain responds to her attack with his own and makes her fall backwards towards his group. She yells at him again, refusing to let him end up there. The whole group jumps on him at once, ready to attack together. Everyone pounces on him in a storm of weapons and movement. He blocks and redirects them as she is thrown upwards by the chaos. Take a look behind him. Nell watches without intervening as one of her own struggles to contain the fight. An enraged beastman charges at Cain with a wild scream. Cain blocks the incoming blow as his sword breaks. Cain calmly explains that the man who was attacked earlier was actually a spy. The beast woman rejects the accusation, insisting that the man could not be a spy. Nerd asks him the reason for his suspicion, and he asks if he knows the Jepril school. He explains that the school specializes in physical magic, and that this particular technique belongs to them. He reveals that the spy was using body transformation magic as the corpse begins to transform. The group recoils in shock as they witness the dead man's face change to an unknown one. Cain explains that a special stone was implanted into the spy's body, allowing him to perfectly mimic someone else's mana. Nell hears that the man was sent by Atla and accepts that Cain only acted because he was sure. He then asks him how he managed to see through a Jepril magic technique despite being a swordsman. He also asks why the spy's identity was kept instead of warning them. Cain says that the first question has an easy answer and reveals that he knows everything about the continent's 73 magic schools. Cain says the second answer is complicated and blames his tendency to act compulsively. Remember how Ryan shaped Cain's fate so that his malice was directed only at evil targets. He admits that now, every time he feels the evil, his body moves on its own. Later, on the second floor of the inn, Nerd asks her to explain herself before acting the next time. Cain apologizes and promises to control himself better during the mission. Nerd still thanks him for what he did and says that he will ask the princess for a reward for him. He tells her that he is currently praying on the top floor. Panic takes hold of her as she lunges forward, screaming for the princess. A sudden revelation hits her as she remembers who was responsible for preparing the altar. He runs into the chamber and finds the princess standing there. Relief sets in briefly when they are seen to be safe. Sia asks if the lower floors have been attacked, and Nell says it's a little more complicated than that. Sia points out that only a handful of people could really threaten her. Ready at the moment. He regrets that the attackers did not survive, as capturing them could have revealed more useful information. Then he feels for sure that there is still an enemy somewhere nearby. Although the presence has been carefully erased, he trusts his perception under the moonlight. Without hesitation, she runs towards the threat, while Nell follows in a panic. Nell realizes that the only one capable of erasing her presence at this moment is Cain. He points out that Full Moon's power is rivaled by that of the Beast King at his peak. Nell runs ahead, terrified that Cain won't be able to resist the strength of the unprotected princess. Cain blocks the princess' sudden attack without flinching, and notices that she is stronger than he expected. Sia is frozen with shock when she realizes that she has hit Cain. He apologizes while Nell recovers mentally from what she has just witnessed. Nell remembers that not even the Beast King could have stopped that blow so easily. His thoughts conclude with the terrifying possibility that Cain will surpass even the Beast King. Cain informs him that Hale had been a spy all along, and relates it to the magic that was hiding his true nature. It is explained that his power to read fate works as long as he can look directly at the person. He clarifies that his ability depends on sensing a person's unique mana. Cain reflects on how no one can hide their mana from the priestess' sight, and acknowledges that her detection ability is so strong that it seems unfair. Nell berates her in shock for revealing sensitive information, but insists to herself that her life matters more than protecting a state secret. Nell sighs and warns Cain that what she heard is confidential. Cain remains silent, leading them to call him by his name in confusion. Cain stands up and tells them that there is a danger approaching. He tells them that the enemies have surrounded the entire area. Meanwhile, enemies positioned in the distance are wondering why their ally reported so late. Ratman looks irritated as he rants about how Hale should have taken the job seriously. Racid explains that they do not need to take care of Jail, as the transformation magic is risky enough to kill its user. Jail shuts Ratman up when he laughs at Razzle's trick. Ratman tries to play hard to get with Jail, but Jail claims that the spy infiltrated a long time ago and has not returned. They both ask him furiously to their commander permission to kill the other while they clash heads. The commander says that anyone who lands a sword in front of him will be killed. Cain notices the lethal intent radiating from the rank 12 enemy. Racid orders Hale to notify the others and warns that if a report does not arrive soon, they will move forward with the mission. Ratman eagerly prepares, excited that the operation is about to begin. He turns to Racid to get some kind of affirmation. Her face twitches in shock as she realizes that something is terribly wrong. He panics and tries to warn Jail that they are without making attacked. He turns around and sees Hale already being motionless on the rooftop. Ratman looks ahead confused, trying to understand what just happened. Cain appears to Ratman, who panics and demands answers. He screams again, demanding to know if Cain caused the massacre. Cain remains calm while Ratman insists on being recognized. Cain then appears behind him and questions if Ratman even counts as a person. Coldly reduces the enemy to nothing but meat while taking him down. Ratman's body falls to the ground as Cain nonchalantly cleans his sword. He inspects the sword with satisfaction, seeing it as a reliable tool for the next few days. Meanwhile, Nell calmly announces that their base must be abandoned now that the enemy has discovered them. He orders the others to leave no trace and to carry only what is necessary. Cain eventually returns to the base and enters where the others gather. Nell begins to ask if he counted the enemies and noticed the commander's appearance, which leaves him confused. She explains that it's important to know who they're fighting, but he doesn't seem sure why that information is necessary. He nonchalantly reveals that there is no enemy left to study because he has already annihilated them. She looks at him in disbelief, still trying to process what she has accomplished. His attention is diverted to the sword, and he admits that he simply took the blade as a trophy after defeating its owner. She freezes over when they find out that she unknowingly killed the sacred magic swordsman. He explains that the man he defeated was Racid, a powerful executive known for his magic sword. He adds that it is said that the sword can cut anything, which makes him smile. She jumps out of surprise when he admits that he has no idea about swords. Nell starts to tie up ends and thinks that maybe he's not a swordsman at all, but a sudden burst of light suspends her thoughts. The desired transformation is completed and calmly announces that it is ready. He thanks Cain for the scouting effort and takes command of the situation. When he offers to take care of the attackers, she refuses and insists that they cannot depend on him anymore. He indifferently explains that he has already deleted everyone, which leaves her frozen and not knowing how to respond. In a dark place far away from them, a report arrives that Racid's communication has suddenly stopped. An Atla executive named Banda stepped forward in disbelief at the news. He insists that Racid should never have lost to the Beast King's royal guard, given their strength close to rank 7. The subordinate reports that Sia possesses a bloodline that is rumored to surpass even that of the Beast King. They discuss how dangerous the Beastman's instincts would be combined with awakened blood. The girl decides to confirm everything through her intelligence network. Van asks what their next move should be, as they need a new plan after Racid's failure. She reveals that they had already prepared a contingency plan. Van laughs, leaves her with his team, and shifts his focus to another task. The next day, Cain walks through the ruins of the forest on the outskirts of the village. She remembers agreeing to separate from the two girls and regroup the next morning. He arrives 2 hours early and decides to reflect in silence while he waits. He starts meditating and remembers how the body and the mind followed each other in a cycle. Ryan challenges him to find out which of the two really leads. Your first task is to unravel that question during meditation, which makes you wonder if today will be the day you understand it. In the meantime, he wearily lies down. Together with Nell, after overloading their awakened power, they realize that they have been walking in circles, despite knowing this forest well. A strange flow of energy winds through the trees around him. They feel an unusual presence and run towards it, wondering if there is something sacred nearby. They make their way through the bushes and are surprised to find Cain radiating a mysterious energy. The princess compares the scene to a famous work of art that her brother once showed her. His memory is transformed into a painted image that reflects Cain's current state. A sudden revelation hits her just as a dark vortex begins to form in Cain's core. A burst of violent energy erupts as she recognizes the celestial evil. Cain steadies himself in a cosmic space and sighs as the strange phenomenon repeats itself. He reflects on how his mana disappeared after eating the heavenly peach, but returns briefly during introspection. He admits that he still can't find an answer, and suddenly notices that two blurred figures appear. Coming back to reality, he sees the two girls watching him, and asks them how long they have been there. They tell him that they arrived a few moments ago, and he wonders why he didn't feel her at all. Cain greets her calmly, surprising the princess, who reacts embarrassed. She waves her hands nervously and explains that she saw something strange, and that she must still be half asleep. Time passes, and a gathered crowd waits while the group arrives. The group apologizes to the girls, but Nerd insists that the delay was Cain's responsibility. Cain looks confused as he wonders if he accidentally caused trouble. He learns that the mana he released turned the forest into a maze without him noticing. Neil describes the energy they felt as something close to pure nature. The heavenly peach contains concentrated energy from the divine realm, which causes it to radiate the same kind of energy found in nature. Cain wonders if the peach's natural aura spilled out during his introspection. Nell decides to start their meeting before the day ahead of them. He remembers the luminous black void he glimpsed earlier and struggles to understand what it meant. He refuses to believe it was Cain's fate, but he still worries about what that vision represented. Nell ends the briefing and orders everyone to get going immediately. The communications officer sets up the equipment as the team prepares to move forward. The supply officer marches with the group carrying heavy backpacks. A recon mage activates an alarm spell to support the mission. Cain turns to Neil and praises his abilities. She explains that they must return to the second continent soon, and is worried about leaving after Cain helped us. She begins to explain her upcoming itinerary before Cain notices a sign. A surge of energy shakes her when the transmission is connected. He reports that Atla has started moving, but they are not getting any closer to their location. Atla is wreaking havoc in the downtown district of the capital, while his men are torturing civilians. Cal is ordered to sign a forced contract. His eyes widen as the man reveals Ironheart's command. Two people are standing outside Ironheart as the place announces that it is closed for the day. The guards explain that they are dealing with problems that they cannot solve in time. The guards listen to the customers praise him polite and friendly that the vigilantes are. One of the guards vents his frustration about how restrictive his reputation is. His partner panics and warns him to lower his voice earlier, before they get into trouble. They both stop when he thinks he has heard something unexpected nearby. A sudden blow goes through him. The second guard is grabbed, and his neck is twisted instantly. Cain stands before them and expresses his gratitude for the support that helped to resolve the situation smoothly. A creepy smile follows the statement that his help is free. The guards rush forward in panic as they recognize the impending attack. Cain glides past one of them with terrifying speed. A guard collapses before he even understands what happened. The remaining guard realizes too late that he is completely overcome and calls for reinforcements. Cain grabs his head and explains that no one outside can see or hear him. He then reports that all outside surveillance has already been removed. He asks if they can now move on to placing the talismans, and is instructed to install them with a precise spacing throughout the area. The talismans are put on instantly, while Kane confirms the exact measurements. She is stunned by his speed, while he casually comments on her sense of distance. He realizes that his accuracy is far beyond the normal, and even surpasses the tribes known for their extreme sensitivity. The barrier activates and seals the entire district in a glowing dome. She tells him that the barrier will last 10 minutes, which he decides is more than enough. Under the full moon, his clan transforms into a force destined to crush enemies with brute power. Outside of the full moon, they act as specialists, support lists that masterfully manipulate formations. He notes with satisfaction that having her strengthens his plans drastically. Back at Cal's workshop, the group threatens to throw more people into the fire, unless the contract is signed immediately. Terrified, Cal prepares to obey as they start an account. Regressive. She panics and finally agrees to cooperate as the man frantically holds up the contract. The man smiles smugly and reminds Cal that he ordered him to sign before the countdown ended. The man pounces with a twisted excitement, eager to hear more screams. He triumphantly brags that this is what happens when someone challenges Atla, and screams for help to Cal as the flames get closer, just as a voice suddenly describes the horrific pain of being burned alive. Kane appears and lists each stage of suffering with a smile, pointing out how he exhausts her. Agony prevents even fainting. Take a step forward and calmly explain that the victim will feel every cell die until the end. He expects the man to taste the punishment completely as he approaches to apply it. The man bursts into flames as his agony echoes through the room. Kane turns to the trembling group and casually asks who he wants to be next. Later, Cal hugs Emmy as he tries to calm her down, though she flinches in pain. Kane intervenes and prevents the workers from giving Emmy ice before they can make his injury worse. She adds that there is already a healer waiting outside the barrier for moments like this. Outside, Kane's sharp intent settles in and he flinches at the sudden pressure. Kane brings her in and asks if he can treat Emmy's burns. The girl is examined gently and prepares her healing technique, and touches her surprised face as the pain disappears instantly. The workers are stunned by the level of healing and comment on Kane's impressive teammates. Kane quietly assesses her and admits that her support potential is far beyond what he imagined. Nar informs them that there are only a few minutes left before the barrier falls and urges them to move quickly. Cal urges everyone to evacuate immediately as workers hesitate. One of them panics about leaving his stored weapons behind, but Cal insists that survival is more important. As they start to leave, Kane yells at him to stop. He asks Lord Kale to stay for a moment because he has a personal request. A brilliant formation comes to life as its power is channeled. Extend the protective barrier long enough to gain extra time. Cal realizes that he forgot the mistletoe in his room, while Kane decides that it is faster to go through the main warehouse. He plans to retrieve all the finished weapons, and shows a small cube that will somehow make it possible. She tries to reach the cube, curious to know what it is, but Kane warns her not to touch it. The cube transforms into a monstrous mimic chest that bursts open with rows of teeth. Kane immediately apologizes while Neil clings to the shocked princess. The creature is a mimic born from the secrets twisted by the greed of the labyrinth. Kale demands to know how Kane got something with a long-forgotten demonic legacy. A sudden stomp smashes the wooden door. The Atlas soldiers burst in, screaming, confused by the destruction. They discover the warehouse completely empty and panic about the missing weapons. The commander orders his men to capture all the blacksmiths and their families. His anger spirals out of control as he vows brutal revenge against those who dared to defy Atla. Meanwhile, Cal and the others arrive at the evacuation point, where the blacksmiths receive them. The smiths explain that Atla attacked not only them, but also their loved ones. Kana watches the workers chatting around her, quietly admitting that Nell's quick coordination still takes him by surprise. Cal admits that he is unsure of his next destination, while they are casually invited to join her on the second continent, where a real aircraft will arrive in 4 days. Hearing that, Cal's face lights up, and he tries to hand over his greatest creation as a thank you. He asks if he can grant them a favor, explaining that they simply need a place to work on an unfinished sword before the trip. He presents the materials of the sword, revealing that it is a special blade that will be completed in 4 days for Kane. The two girls arrive at an abandoned factory, offered as the only space of work available. He wonders if he has managed to contact his homeland yet, and Neil explains that contacting the first prince directly has been difficult because they keep avoiding other terminals. He says they would be able to contact immediately if they allow their signal to be detected by any terminal, but if he refuses, Nell becomes uneasy at the idea that one of the 13 might actually be a spy. The 13 stationed at the terminals are trusted elite figures of the kingdom, and among them are the prince's main guardians, the best warriors and several high officials. It is explained that only those 3 know the source of their strength, and insist that they contact only the one person whose loyalty is guaranteed. That person is the first prince, respected by everyone, and recognized as his brother. The two reflect on how mysterious Lorcan is and how he possesses a rare artifact. Both admit that they do not fully understand Cain, but believe that he is not aligned with evil. However, the terrifying aura that once arose from him is remembered. 4 days later, Cain thanks Nell for the trap she set around the area. Then, they gather the craftsmen and prepare to leave. Sia tells Cain that it would have been ideal if she could join them, but that they will be back as soon as possible. He refuses to take his time, as a delay could force Cain to solve the situation alone. Cal then reminds Cain that the sword cannot be wielded until it is completely finished. Cain reassures him and says he is grateful that most of the work is done. The group waits on the shore while the actual aircraft approaches. Nerd tells him that the aircraft arrived exactly on time. A sudden attack hits towards at high speed. The attacker says that everything is unfolding just as the Emperor predicted. Both girls realize that their plans have been leaked. The hostile group identifies them as the people who rescued the Iron Hearts. The leader gets irritated when no one responds and prepares to force responses. One of the enemies orders the activation of the speaker device. A warning is spread for everyone to stop using blood circulation skills immediately. They begin to realize that the nerd group understands the device and become even more irritated by the situation. Their leader scolds his men and points out that the device is useless, because the beastmen aren't even using the technique it's supposed to counter. His subordinate rushes forward and orders his troops to annihilate everyone, while Neil rushes into the combat and asks him to secure enough time to escape. Sia takes over and tells Neil to back off, as her own techniques are unaffected by the suppression device. The enemy panics when he realizes that the princess is preparing something, but it is already too late. He spreads his talismans in the air to activate his formation. Talismans are scattered across the field as the spell begins to take shape. A bright flash of light explodes in front of the attacking soldiers. A huge spirit beast emerges as Sia's protection formation. Genbu manifests around his allies. He injects more power into the barrier and refuses to let anyone set foot inside. Meanwhile, Cain waits alone in the abandoned factory, wondering how long it will take for the sword to be ready. Seeing the Black Fang sword at his side, he debates whether to return it to Nell. He hesitates because he can't leave his new sword unattended. Back on the battlefield, the barrier is maintained as the enemy approaches. The enemy complains that if he fails here, he will be executed. He looks over and mockingly asks him if he should give up himself. Suddenly, the real aircraft comes over them. Nell shouts that everyone has boarded and urges to withdraw. The enemy laughs as he realizes that the barrier cannot be maintained from a distance, sure that the shield will collapse the moment she moves. If she grimaces as she forces herself to maintain the formation, accepting that being caught alone is better than letting her people die. He runs to her and begs her to release the barrier so he can protect her. He apologizes to himself as he prepares to use the sacred authority that imposes absolute obedience, and that he once swore never to invoke. Nell panics when the order hits her and forces her body to obey. Nell recites the order aloud, trembling as she accepts that she must abandon her princess. She starts running, while begging not to be forgiven for leaving. The aircraft departs, while the enemy casually comments on his emotional farewell. He teases Sed, telling him that it's time to release the formation and walk towards them. He pretends to reassure her before a massive blow suddenly lands in front of him. The sight of the weapon surprises her as she recognizes the sword being used. Cain catches her in his arms when exhaustion finally overcomes her. The men panic when their captain suddenly falls in the battle, asking if their attacker even knows who they are. Kane walks up to them and scoffs at the idea that people like them are capable of loyalty or camaraderie. He watches their bodies freeze as he wonders why people like them are allowed to exist. He removes the sword from the captain's head and notes with relief that the blade of the Black Fang survived the impact. One of the remaining men pounces, screaming at Kane. Kane sighs at how desperate they looked as he takes down the man in one fell swoop. Another group tries to attack him, only to find their colleague's fallen body. They scream as they pounce on Kane in desperation. Kane quickly annihilates them, while declaring that the only value they can offer to this world is through their deaths. More attackers charge in fear and desperation as they try to surround him, shouting that the mere number will be enough to bring him down. But the next moment, their bodies are lying scattered on the ground. Kane notes that Ner's magic sword held up well even though he brandished it indifferently. He then leads towards to find a safe place for his treatment. Elsewhere, Van strangles his subordinate and asks for confirmation that she escaped. She explains that a powerful warrior suddenly appeared and ruined the capture. He insists that Van watch the recording himself, revealing that he always assigns his members mono recorders in case of emergencies. The recording surprises Van, who asks about the quality of the recorder, only to be told that it is top-notch. He mutters that there are only 3 people whose strength cannot be captured by a device like this: the Sword Saint, Ryan, and the Atla boss. Van concludes that Kane must be on par with the Sword Saint, and is probably as strong as his own leader. He speculates that Ryan might have secretly infiltrated the central continent. She lay bruised on a cracked stone floor, slowly regaining consciousness. She joins the force while wondering if she was imprisoned by the enemy. Think of Nell, asking her not to feel guilty about what happened. Nell's oath rings out again, recalling her obedience to the order that forced her to flee. Ifa fears that once Nell returns home and the order is lifted, she may choose a tragic fate. Overwhelmed with dread, she silently prays that this fear is not true. He breaks down in tears and apologizes in his heart to his family, Neural, even to Morkan. Kane walks up to her and apologizes as if he just fell asleep nearby, while she wonders if it's real or just a hallucination. Check on the princess and try to reassure her while she is still recovering. She bursts into tears when she realizes Kane is real, causing Kane to panic and think she is hurt somewhere. He offers her a radiant elixir, saying that it will help her recover. Just being close to her glow already eases the pain in her body. She hesitates, insisting that something so valuable should not be used on her. Kane wonders if this isn't the exact moment he's supposed to give it to her, as he recalls Ryan urging him to save the priestess. Kane tells her to just let him know when she really needs him, while she quietly thanks him. She asks him about his sword, and Kane reveals that he brought it inside a mimic, so that he would not be considered to be in direct contact with her. Call the mimic to reveal the stored sheet. Kana admits that she still doesn't know if the sword continues to mature while inside the creature. A light bursts from the mimic as the box begins to react. High above, the actual aircraft is sailing steadily through clear skies. Cal's subordinate comes up to him and asks him why he's been sighing so much. Cal blames himself, thinking that Kane wouldn't have gotten stuck in that factory if the sword didn't need to mature. His subordinate asks him if the maturation process is really so problematic. Cal explains that the sword itself is simple to mature, but the problem is absorbing enough mana. Meanwhile, Kane and the trembling mime look at each other while wondering what exactly is happening. Kane wonders if the mimic could have accelerated the sword's maturation process on his own. He decides that they can move immediately and asks the mimic for the Black Wolf's sword as well. He says that this moment is perfect to attack the Atla base, since the central continent is almost deserted. He reasons that the top brass must have left, as they never intervened during the attack on the aircraft. He suggests going directly to the enemy base to gather information. Then, he extends his hand and tells the princess that he needs her support. Inside the Atla base, the surveillance commander demands that his team track them down at all costs. She panics because not finding her in 3 days means her death. One of the cameras short circuits, while the consciousness-blocking magic wishes to keep them hidden. He peeks around the corner as Kai notices how conveniently the trick is working. A group of guards spots them and charge forward in alarm. Kane immediately takes up his weapon. It bursts through the squad with a sudden sweeping blow that sends bodies flying in all directions. He wields the borrowed sword with quick precision and knocks down the men who pounce on him. The commander bursts into the hallway, screaming as he kicks the air in confusion. She freezes at the sight of the princess, realizing that she never expected her to come herself. Kane pounces on him with a clenched fist before he can finish speaking. Kane is glad that he stops while his fist stops right in front of the commander's face. She intervenes and decides that the officer is still useful for her mission. She presses a talisman to his forehead and demands that he reveal the access code. Under the spell, he lists the numbers while Kane enters them into the system. The terminal is successfully unlocked by showing their access while they watch the screen light up. Kane studies the conscious screen as they uncover reports detailing the invasion spreading across multiple continents. He realizes that the data shows the progress of the invasion measured in percentages. It focuses on the state of the first continent, which is almost consumed with a staggering 99%. He remembers how the unified kingdom that his grandfather built was once strong. But he sees its collapse after 14 years before his very eyes. She silently wonders what her father might be doing during all this. Rage escapes him as he vows to destroy Atla, and he is watched with concern. He apologizes, admitting that he lost control because Atla is his homeland. She asks about the remaining continents and whether they face a similar danger. Kane reports that the third continent has barely been touched, while the second continent is at 38. Kane studies the map and observes that Ella's royal family continues to resist despite the invasion. Sia realizes that her previous suspicion was unfounded and admits that her brother was not involved. She explains that only 3 people knew about the return operation, and she is relieved that the doubt has disappeared. Kane warns her that it's too early to relax, while pointing out that Nell has no idea what's going on right now. Kane adds that if Nell believed that the first prince betrayed them, things would escalate quickly. He panics as he realizes that he needs to inform his father immediately upon arriving at the second continent. Kane explains that imprisoning the prince would fracture trust in the royal family. He concludes that the weakened sanctuary will make it easier for Atla to take advantage of that moment and completely invade the second continent. She anxiously asks what they are supposed to do next in this situation. Kane decides that his best option is to head straight to the headquarters in Barakal. It is the largest base of Atla, with more than 1,000 members gathered in it. He says that his only option is to break through the enemy lines and find a communication device before Nell reaches the second continent. His eyes narrow as he processes the urgency of the situation. The aircraft is moving steadily towards the second continent as time is ticking. They are urged to move quickly as the reminder pops up that there are only 8 hours left. The huge Atlas headquarters looms as angry screams erupt inside. The commander berates his men in the middle of the installation, demanding results that they do not have yet. His subordinates rush to explain that almost everyone has already been mobilized for the search. The commander mutters that a terrifying person will arrive at the central continent soon. His men look around nervously, realizing who he might be referring to. A squad runs down the hallway, answering his call with frantic urgency. He yells at them for abandoning their post, unable to understand why they moved in the first place. They insist he told them to go to the basement because of an intruder alert. Kane's calm voice resonates as he reveals that he intentionally brought them together for a clean and quick takedown. The soldiers freeze as Kane approaches, demanding to know who he is. "Come out of the shadows and present yourself as the Grim Reaper." The lights go out abruptly, leaving the soldiers confused as they stare at him in the dark. Sia calmly tells him that she has disconnected the entire power grid. He explains that he is also activating the sensory talisman. The commander harangues his men to stay focused, only for Kane to instantly come over and punch him in the face. A violent impact causes the commander to be thrown backwards. A soldier calls the commander in a panic just before a fist hits him from the darkness. Kane tests the weight of his sword and notices its usefulness just by the sound. He advances and says it's time to see what he can do, while a terrified guard pleads for mercy. Kane responds to the plea with an unsettling smile that promises nothing good. Looking through the monitor, he notices the red silhouettes that meet with the illusion magic he cast for Kane. She watches in shock as the scene resembles a ruthless massacre carried out by someone who seems to enjoy killing. He wonders if his previous vision filled with darkness could have been showing Kane's fate all along. Remembering how they found Leon in a similar condition, he begins to question whether his suspicions are true. Kane stands before the silent troops with his sword resting on his shoulder, pleased that they finally understand the fear in the room. Kane decides that the fight is getting boring, and therefore wants to change the rules. A terrified man leans out, startled as Kane announces a challenge. Several men immediately jump up, begging for their lives to be spared as panic spreads through the room. Kane realizes that several soldiers begged at the same time, and quietly admits that it ruins his plan. He concludes that he has no choice but to kill them all. Kane unleashes a sweeping broad attack that knocks down the entire group in a single move. The bodies fall to the ground, while Kane remains alone after the massacre. He wipes his chin, and points out that fighting guided by sound alone made the battle more exhausting than usual. He examines the talisman, and realizes that the sensory enhancement was not activated at all. The talisman should allow him to see in the dark, and Kane wonders aloud why it failed, questioning whether it requires the user's own mana. He decides that the only way to get answers is to go and ask him directly towards. Kane finds her, but she immediately approaches with something she wants to clarify. She asks him if he takes pleasure in killing, taking him completely by surprise. She presses him further, accusing him of enjoying how he played with the enemies before finishing them off. A surge of power interrupts their conversation when a man shouts C's name. They turn to the source of the overwhelming electric aura. Van appears and asks what is being done there. Van mocks Kane for so boldly breaking into the Atla headquarters. He unleashes a violent burst of lightning as he vows to tear Kane to pieces. Kane analyzes the movement and realizes that Van intends to eliminate him first to facilitate the capture of Sia. Sia screams Kane's name as the impact connects. Van teases her with a smug smile and claims that he is still useful enough to keep her alive. Kane suddenly lunges at him and notices that even Van's temper is crackling like a storm as he prepares to attack. Kane throws a punch and Van is thrown backwards into the air. Kane's sword breaks on impact. He looks forward anxiously and asks if his battle is finally over. Kane tells him that he is not finished yet and asks him to put on the sacred object that rests inside the mimic. He panics at the sight of a legendary relic and demands to know why Kane has something so important. Kane remembers that he was entrusted with the relic and told that it would purify his nature, but that one day it would have to be back. The relic can awaken the power sealed in Sia's lineage, which will cause her to rise to become the strongest of her kind in history. He tells her that he will explain everything to her later, but asks her to help him first. He admits that he will be knocked unconscious after the fight, and that he needs someone to protect him. Van writhes in rage as sparks crackle through his body. Kane urges towards to retreat as he stands between her and Van. Van roars with rage and unleashes a violent surge of electricity. Kane prepares for the explosion as he yells at him to move. She runs off with a confective apology as she struggles to contain the attack. Kane marches through the thunderstorm, refusing to be overwhelmed by it. The remains of the weapon he used to block the attack suddenly fly out. Van accumulates power in both hands as the room bursts with unstable lightning. Kana admits that she thought rank 8 would be awesome, but now she sees nothing to worry about as she runs towards Van. They're charging forward with a lightning-charged punch. Kana calmly catches the electrified fist with her bare hand. Van is shocked to realize that the lightning has been completely stopped. Kana tightens her grip as she explains that she will demonstrate how that power should really be used. His fist crashes into Van with overwhelming force. Van is dismissed with a stifled scream. The impact causes him to crash to the ground as Kane notices how powerful the blow was. He nonchalantly asks the fallen Van if he learned anything. She catches her breath, relieved to have made it to the control room. She stares at the divine artifact, unsure if she even has the right to wear something so sacred. A sudden noise in the hallway draws his attention to a group running in his direction. The guards realize that the facility's systems are disabled and separate as one of them heads towards their location. He forces himself to concentrate and decides he doesn't have time to hesitate, lifting the headband to his head. A vision of his father resonates as he explains the nature of the artifact as both a blessing and a burden. He goes on to say that the elect may wield it with great fortune, but the unelected will pay with their lives. She insists that someone truly chosen would never be as weak as she is now. Kane's expression from earlier comes back to her mind as he quietly asks for her protection. Remembering the promise he made to her strengthens her resolve. A golden light bursts out as the artifact awakens and engulfs her. Her eyes suddenly open with a burning clarity as a new power floods her senses. Through heightened perception, he sees the outline of the battlefield and confirms Vin's death. He also feels that Kana has fallen unconscious. He determines that he must eliminate the remaining enemies and get Kana to a safe place before reinforcements arrive. The guards rush into the room and immediately notice that it looks empty. Sia comes out of hiding and attacks the soldiers before they can react. He lands on the ground as both men fall. He pulls out a talisman and prepares for the remaining enemies. Kane has the same haunting dream of a battlefield in which he declares that the world belongs to him. He calls to the Drona and justifies that death is a reasonable result. Sia speaks with cold compassion, stating that she feels sorry for those forced into villainy. Her calm expression hardens as she vows to kill him without hesitation. Kane responds to his gaze with a mocking smile and returns the threat. Sia orders her army to charge as the beast warriors advance behind her. A dark power rises around Kane as he lowers his gaze and prepares to test his opponent. A violent explosion of force erupts on the field. Sia shouts his name as he approaches with overwhelming intent. He crashes him to the ground and demands to know why he used his strength in such a reckless way. He lies there with a tired smile and accepts defeat once again. Actually, his body remains unconscious while he was sleeping. Watch with concern. He realizes that Nell will be arriving on the second continent soon, and that her device is useless now. He comes out of the cave to clear his head for a moment. He looks up and realizes that the moon is only half full. Despite the crescent, something in the air feels overwhelmingly like the pull of a full moon. He picks up a mirror and realizes that his eyes have really transformed. A sudden voice casually comments on the weather as she turns around in shock. The rank 1 executive of Atla, named Starfish, talks as if he remembered a distant memory. She demands to know why he has appeared, and he explains that he came after learning of Vin's death. His expression sharpens as he demands Ryan's whereabouts. She questions why Ryan would travel here, and he claims that only a handful of people could have killed Van. List the 3 possible culprits. Name the leader of your organization as one of them, to the sword god of the 4th continent as another, and to Ryan, the supreme ruler of the 1st continent. He insists that Ryan must be somewhere nearby, while she tells him that she has come to the wrong conclusion, and that there is no such person present. He accuses her of hiding the truth and claims that she must have received a false identity. Starkus bursts in and orders him to leave as he moves forward without slowing down. She turns around in shock, barely reacting before he crashes into her with overwhelming force. He throws himself into the air and challenges Ryan to come out and face him. He draws a bright power to his hand as if preparing a long-awaited blow. He unleashes his attack with murderous intent, determined to finally settle the score. Sia sees him preparing to kill and runs to stop him, terrified for Kane who is inside. She lunges at him, forcing her exhausted body to move faster. He intercepts her mid-charge and attacks again, furious that she keeps interfering. The impact explodes in the clearing and sends her flying through the debris. He stands up with difficulty through the smoke and realizes that he survived only thanks to the divine artifact. The spear crashes to the ground. Starfish calmly retrieves his gun, as if he was impressed that she managed to avoid him. His eyes narrow as he reassesses the situation. He lunges forward again and makes it clear that she is not his target. The impact detonates against the barrier that is in front. Sia falls to her knees, devastated that she failed the one person who entrusted her with her safety. The debris is moving while piles of stones are piled up. Starfish notices the lack of response, but he knows that a fighter of such caliber should not go down so easily. Sia forces herself to her feet, driven by rage and despair. He charges at him and vows to kill him with any force or method he can muster. Starfield realizes that his sudden increase in power has changed the course of the fight. He lunges forward in a furious charge as a storm of spears falls around him. Despite dodging with everything she has, the large number of attacks pushes her to the limit. Starfish raises his weapon and decides to end the match without holding back. A violent impact abruptly interrupts his momentum. The battlefield erupts as Kane's voice booms out saying he's in a bad mood. He comes forward and says he had a bad dream and needs to vent his frustrations. Starfish recoils into shock, realizing that Kane is Ryan's son and that he shouldn't be there. Kane's eyes narrow as Starfish asks how he is alive after being killed by Ryan. The battlefield goes silent as Kane is called. Starfish panics and wonders if the information from the Shrine Priestess was completely wrong. The priestess claimed that Kane was allegedly murdered by his own grandfather. She realizes that Ryan could have deceived everyone, including the priestess of the sanctuary. Starfish clenches his fist as he processes that Ryan might not have gone into exile because of guilt. He concludes that Ryan probably lied to protect Kane and adds that he has thought of a satisfactory revenge for Kane. He vows to cut off Kane's head and hand it over as a tribute to Ryan. Kane mocks Starfish's mumbling and compares him to Van while evaluating him. Seeing how the fight escalates, Sia panics because of the danger Kane is getting into. Kane quietly thanks her for protecting him while she watches him come between her and the enemy. He forces himself to accept that staying would only delay him. She decides to trust him as she always has and let him take care of the threat alone. Starfish mocks Kane's decision to fight one-on-one, insisting that he cannot win. Kane smiles and reminds him that Van spoke the same way moments before he died. Starfish challenges Kane to prove that he can repeat that result. Kane lunges forward as brilliant throws rain down around him. He makes his way through the barrage of attacks, deflecting those aimed at him. Notice the enemy's strange tactics as part of his sword begins to melt. Starfish smiles as he realizes that Kane has fallen right into his trap. Kane lunges forward but stumbles when his feet slip. He falls dramatically to the ground when he completely loses his balance. Starfish bursts out incarcerated, excited by how easily Kane fell apart. He proudly names Overwhelming Force as his signature technique that destroys and absorbs any metal he touches. Kane clutches the wound as the blood continues to drip uncontrollably. Starfield points out that not even the iron in Kane's own blood can escape his power. He mocks Kane's shock by nonchalantly demonstrating how unreal his ability seems. He explains that he acquired such power to kill the tyrant, Rain. Kane realizes that the ability resembles the effect of the deep-sea treasure he once absorbed. He admits that he cannot disarm the spear in full attack with his current speed. Faced with that limitation, he carries everything he has, hoping that an early blow will give him a chance. His punch crashes into the ascending spikes, only to be stopped in its tracks. A huge barb sphere forms on him and forces him to retreat. Starfish transforms the field around him to attack and defend with ease, while Kane continues to look for an opening. Notice a strange pattern forming on the shield. A smile escapes him when he finally understands what he is seeing. He reveals the trick behind the changing barrier, pointing out how the force of the metal is being redirected. He prepares and decides to put that statement to the test. His body bursts into motion as it splits into fast-moving residual images that crisscross the battlefield. Find the heart of the shield and aim at it. He lunges forward with a fierce punch that exudes brute force. His punch crashes into Starfish and sends debris flying in all directions. The impact throws him straight into the ground. Kane steps back with a silent exhale as he steadies his hand. Starfield shakes off the dust and comments on the decision to switch to the fists. Kane wonders if magic is the only thing that can hurt this creature, frowning as he remembers that he has no mana left to rely on. He decides that he has no choice but to use the sword, which Cal forged. His pocket trembles when the mime starts to play. He opens it and a bright green light bursts out. Energy cracks spread across the object as he realizes it's the signal Cal warned him about. A vibrant green balloon sprouts from the blade as he raises the newly awakened weapon. He stands with the shining sword in his hand. Starfish looks at him in disbelief as the blade is pointed at him. He scoffs as he charges, sure that a simple stick will never stop him. The barrage of attacks falls, only to be shattered by the sword's unexpected strength. Starfish's confidence is shattered when he realizes that his silver spears are breaking. Cain rushes forward without giving him time to recover. In an instant, the blade goes through Starfish's arms before he can react. Amazement fills his face as he tries to understand how he was injured so easily. Cain stands over him and mocks that he fell to a wooden sword. Starfish warns that magic swords always demand a high price and assumes that Cain paid with his own life to move so fast. Cain reacts with a nonchalant smile as if the accusation is ridiculous, since he is not holding a magic sword. Starfy teases and charges to prove him wrong. He unleashes a fierce attack, convinced that the fight is already over. Cain confronts him head-on and reveals that he has never fought with all his might in his life. He admits that the reason is simple, since no sword has survived its true power. He smiles maniacally as he finally holds a blade that can withstand his strength. He mockingly begs Starfish to withstand a single blow. The impact makes him land with a powerful movement after the blow. The enemy's body begins to fall apart. Cain exhales with a small smile and savors the feeling of wielding it with all his might. He remembers his grandfather's words about the joy of wielding a sword and finally understands them. Grip the handle tighter as the understanding settles in completely. He stabilizes and decides to search the defeated enemy for any useful information. He bends down and reaches for the small data chip, ready to examine it. As he bends over to analyze it, fatigue suddenly overwhelms him. His vision becomes blurred and he stumbles. He forces himself to straighten up while acknowledging the blood loss and the toll that technique took on him. She rushes towards him and panics at the sight of his wound as he weakly lifts the chip for her to take. Cain collapses again as he rushes towards him in panic. In the distance, a madman revels in the chaos he has unleashed on the world. Cain mocks a woman known for her search for the truth, named Serena, while she intervenes with open hostility. She declares her intention to finish him off and fix what he has ruined. She confronts him face to face, refusing to give in despite his arrogant confidence. He mocks her audacity, unleashing a surge of dark power and roaring for her to try if she dares. Serena gathers her forces and charges towards what she believes is the final battle. The shock detonates in a massive shock wave. The battlefield is thrown into chaos as bodies and debris are thrown through the air. Serena crashes to the floor, coughing as she tries to get up. He wonders furiously why so many had to die because of someone like him. Rage floods his mind as he imagines tearing Cain apart if he could go back in time. A sharp gasp awakens Cain from the darkness. He realizes that he is inside an inn. Notice that the divine artifact has correctly rooted essence. As he recovers, he wonders if he tied up his wounds without being able to get rid of the persistent sleep. The memory of that vision feels heavier than before, becoming clearer and more frightening. He begins to wonder if such a future awaits him. Sia moves around and complains about falling asleep again. They confirm that the contact with the second continent failed because Atra interrupted its communication codes and left the device useless. Given the lack of options and limited time, Asia is worried that it will be impossible to contact someone in time without a code or transportation. Cain gets out of bed and asks for the communication device. Asia asks what code he is entering, but he tells her that he will find out soon. A familiar voice comes through the device, taking it by surprise as recognition surfaces. The call reveals her father on the other end, his fury erupting as he demands answers from Ryan. At the palace of the second continent, Sia's father furiously questions why Ryan stole his divine artifact. He mentions the disturbing letter Rain left behind as evidence, revealing that he only borrowed the artifact and entrusted them with the protection of the communication device. Her father presses for an answer and gets even angrier. Just as Sia's voice connects, Sia intervenes and nervously reveals that she is the one who has the communicator. She asks for privacy before continuing, and he confirms that he is really only on camera. She tells him that they can't afford for anyone else to listen to her. Later, he covers his face in frustration at giving himself. He realizes that the enemy is already moving, and blames himself for noticing it too late. He praises her efforts, and she redirects the merit. Cain suddenly covers her mouth before she can say anything else. Then, he hurriedly insists that his brother is not the traitor, and begs not to be imprisoned. His father tells him not to worry about it, and demands to know how he got the communication device. He pounces a fake disconnection of the device and apologizes for ending the call. Kana admits that she barely managed to fool the Beast King this time about Rainer's grandson stealing the artifact. He decides it's time to explain everything to her. The revelation surprises her as she processes that he is directly connected to Ran. The resemblance makes sense to her now, and it becomes clear that the grandfather was revealed to her on purpose. She argues that the truth could be explained calmly since the artifact should be returned, but he dismisses it. The Beast King's short temper and love of battle make it obvious that he would pursue the artifact without hearing any explanation. Then they decide to try the starfish chip. As the device boots up, he starts reviewing the information while she watches closely. The images reveal Serena, who is pursuing the truth. She is a powerful witch from the third continent who is connected to Cain. He wonders why she would be on the starfish chip and decides to investigate further. They open her profile and confirm her identity as Serena, a critical figure linked to the Tower of Machines. He wonders why Atla would suddenly start investigating his actions when nothing was supposed to happen yet. Remember that her first recorded appearance should still be years away, and that she already rules the Tower of Machines. As he scrolls further down, a shocking entry states that he is supposed to be dead himself. Remember Starfield's words about being killed by rain. Put aside the confusion and decide to copy everything before worrying about the contradiction. Halfway through the transfer, it freezes. The updated report indicates that the third continent shows no signs of invasion at all. They conclude that the starfish data should be more current and reliable than the monitoring station report. Additional records show that the stolen Atla machinery was recovered quickly, leaving little time for intelligence leaks. He wonders who could have turned the tables so perfectly, and Cain briefly considers his grandfather before dismissing the idea. Cain calmly lays out a plan that begins with the elimination of key figures who remain linked to the central continent. He identifies the real threat as the mysterious leader of Atlas. No one knows anything about this leader, only he is called the Absolute. When asked if she could face that being, Kana admits that a direct encounter right now would almost certainly end in her death. Remember Dan's warning and the note that foretold his fate at the hands of Atla. Accepting the weight of that prophecy, Cain considers that he must change if he is to challenge the future. Cain suddenly remembers something that he had to return to her towards. He gives her back the talisman meant to sharpen her senses that she once gave him. She checks the talisman in confusion, realizing that it was never activated despite appearing intact. Kana admits that she doesn't quite understand why, although she quietly suspects that it has something to do with her own condition. Back then, all of his senses were suppressed, forcing him to rely on sounds to indicate his position. He finally understands his difficulties at that moment and apologizes for having misunderstood him. As the evening progresses, the two decide to rest and get ready to leave early the next day. A formal report begins detailing the destruction of Atlas Central Headquarters and confirms the deaths of several high-ranking figures. To investigate the dilapidated headquarters, multiple mid-level executives are sent to the scene. Contact with the investigation team is lost halfway through, and all members are confirmed dead at the scene later. The report concludes that the same individual behind Bam's death was responsible, and that it was not an accident. While requesting reinforcements from the authorities, the investigator realizes too late that Cain is already after him. Cain attacks decisively from behind, knocking the investigator down before he can react. Despite the chaos and bloodshed, a final transmission is successfully sent. Night falls silently over the forest. Subsequent reports indicate that all Atla executives were quickly eliminated, and almost without resistance. A figure smiles and realizes that if the enemy is really that powerful, he needs to witness that force with his own eyes. A few days later, at the central port, Cain explains that the remaining executives are expected to pass through the port. So waiting there is the safest option. From above, the long pier and the docked boats show how easy it would be for the targets to blend in with the crowd. Cain calmly assures him that he will recognize them the moment they appear. When she asks about the sacred ring, Cain begins to explain his purpose but hesitates. A sudden sensation hits him as he recalls an overwhelming aura he has felt before. He sees the sword god and Ryu standing next to someone else. That presence manifests as a massive black aura that twists violently and is unlike anything I have encountered before. The sword god's eyes sharpen as he turns and jumps. He greets Cain from behind, pointing out that it's been a month since then. Cain realizes that the god of the sword was the one who watched him in the village. The sword god studies him closely and wonders what kind of plan he might be hiding. He looks at Kanisha, noticing that he doesn't see anyone suspicious around. Still, he wonders why Cain would need to observe him if he's not part of Atlas. Cain reassures him and claims that he came without malice. Instead of explaining further, Ryu suddenly lunges forward and dismisses his words completely. He points out how close they are to the docks and concludes that there is no way this meeting is a coincidence. Cain immediately recognizes her along with Sia and Serena. These star-linked women are the ones he is destined to fall in love with. Ryu moves to attack, convinced that they must be connected to Atla, despite her master's warning. The figure firm before named Sean arrives, and Cain notices immediately that there are no signs of transformation magic or disguise. Still, Sean's true form leaks out, leaving Cain unsettled as to how such overwhelming evil can be hidden. Sean chides Ryu's impatience, while Cain wonders if he's hiding a magic subtle enough to evade even his perception. Cain accepts that the misunderstanding is inevitable and suggests that he can clear his doubts by revealing a proof. He formally introduces himself and declares his lineage as the first prince of his first continent kingdom. The sudden revelation surprises everyone present, provoking shocked reactions from all sides. The sword god inspects the emblem presented by Cain and demands confirmation of his claim. Cain reveals the mimic as a strange gift received from his grandfather. With the evidence revealed, the sword god relaxes and admits that the situation was a misunderstanding. Apologies follow as Cain is recognized as royalty, and tension briefly dissolves. Sean smiles warmly and steps forward, offering a polite introduction. In an instant, blood splatters the scene as Sean is taken down. The group reacts shocked when Cain suddenly attacks him. Lightning bursts out in fury, teeth clenched as anger overcomes any sense of restraint. He charges forward recklessly, leaping at Cain. Cain slams her away and asks her to listen to him. He gets up again and refuses to listen as he pounces once more. Cain declares that the man they are protecting is not who they think he is. He tells them that Sean is the leader of Atlas. The sword god intervenes and intercepts Ryu's blade before it can reach its target. The god of the sword insists that if Cain must die, he himself will bear that responsibility. When Ryu protests, a dark aura surrounds the sword god and tells him not to make it happen again. The sudden tension grabs everyone's attention as the commotion spreads. He steps forward and confronts Cain directly, while admitting that he didn't find anything suspicious on Sean's body. He challenges Cain to explain what proof he has to accuse his disciple of being the leader of Atla. Cain tells him he can't explain it. The sword god's gaze hardens as he condemns the decision to kill without evidence and questions the values Cain was raised with. Without hesitation, he goes on the attack and tells Cain to apologize to Sean in the afterlife. Cain narrowly reacts as he realizes that if he fails to stop this blow, his life will end here. A column of violent lightning pierces through Cain's heart. Then, suddenly, he feels a faint but unmistakable return of mana stirring in his body. The sword god lunges again as Cain realizes that he can track the flow of mana and anticipate the blow. Their weapons collide in a thunderous clatter. The girls freeze up when Cain manages to stop the master sword head-on. A familiar feeling of dread seizes Cain as memories of the forest resurface. The sword god begins to recognize that Cain is far from ordinary after being able to stop his sword. He commits to a decisive charge with the intention of ending the fight. The sword god's severed arm suddenly flies away as a voice asks him to stop. The arm lands heavily before a pair of boots. The man Cain claims to be the leader of Alta suddenly stands up and declares that Cain's head is his. Cain recalls a conversation in which Rain warned him about Alta and its leader, whose true nature remains completely unknown. Rain hinted that some futures should never have existed, and that fate had already begun to twist. Grab a cup as the weight of that warning settles and caution becomes inevitable. Back on the battlefield, Cain stands before the leader. He stabilizes and remembers how Rand's advice allowed him to perceive the presence of the absolute being. He discovers that Sean used an unknown power to hide himself and possess something as unnatural as immortality. Lightning asks if the sword god had been put under a spell, while he simply acknowledges that the man before them is not Sean. Sean declares himself to be the same beloved student that the sword god has been teaching for 11 years. He recounts memories from years ago, when training injuries and reckless growth were part of their shared past. He remembers an even earlier time when Reo was young and drawing his first map on a pillow. Then he remembers the moment the sword god found him wounded and alone on the roadside. The memory cuts to its current resolution. He reveals that every moment of guidance and care was just a mask designed to prepare for this inevitable betrayal. Doubt and shock run through the god of the sword. He moves in an instant and recognizes that Cain was telling the truth all along. The two collide in a violent mid-air exchange as swords and bodies crash in a flurry of major blows. Relentless. Sean praises how amazing the sword god's intuition is. He then mocks the very intuition he praised for not being able to uncover the truth he had been hiding. The sword god realizes that he no longer has the strength to defeat Sean. Then, he urgently tells Cain and the others to escape. He raises his sword and declares that he will stop Sean to buy time. Lightning screams in panic as Cain simply accepts his decision. A violent explosion erupts as he confronts Sean. He entrusts his school and his continent to Reo. She shoots out with Cain, while silently nodding at people. The words of the god of the sword. Sean turns to them and swears that running away won't get them out of his grasp. The sword god throws himself on him and reminds him that he is his opponent. The clash erupts into a collision as they brandish their swords. Sean attacks harder and insists on a fair fight to prove that, with the expectations of his teacher. The sword god bursts out and silences Sean as he lowers his sword. Sean is reeling from the impact and lets out a choked gasp when the punch hits cleanly. Steel runs through his body as his eyes widen wide. He falls to his knees and admits with gritted teeth that this is exactly what I expected from the sword god. The sword god studies him and notices that not even a direct blow to the heart was enough to kill him. He realizes that a sword alone might not be enough to end this. Sean smiles and asks what he plans to do next as the power builds up in his hand. Cracks of energy spread over him as he challenges whether even this power can be stopped. A huge piece of earth ignites as it rushes down. The burning mass crashes to the ground in a violent explosion. It falls from the sky as the group runs, and Ryu shouts an alarm for his teacher. Cain looks up in shock, realizing what is falling towards them. The sword god looks ahead in silence, already understanding the situation. A memory arises from decades ago, when he himself was a disciple and learned that uncontrolled strength only leads to death. He remembers his teacher warning him never to let his guard down. Lying wounded on the ground, he remembers surviving by holding on to that lesson and refusing to die without finishing his work. He accepted that keeping his guard up became the rule of his life and the price of his own negligence. He concludes that believing in John also means taking responsibility for ending him if necessary. He declares that he will untie his sword for the sake of his disciple. Lightning screams in despair as she realizes what she is about to do. His grip tightens, his eyes sharpen as he completely surrenders to the blow. The sheet parts to Sean directly in half. The sword god immediately jumps up to prevent the falling debris from hitting him. Lightning expresses her relief at her victory, but Cain urges her to leave immediately. As they climb over the roof, Cain tells him that Sean is not dead yet. Downstairs, the sword god feels Sean's presence disappear and wonders where he fled to. Then, he suddenly reappears behind him, mocking the idea that such power could come from a single arm. The sword god's eyes widen wide when he realizes that his sword can't get through Sean's mana. Sean declares that no divine sword can stop his power. It reveals that this magic exists solely to counteract such ideas. The shock wave destroys the roofs. Sean looks at the badly wounded sword god and notices that he is still clinging to life. He raises his sword with calm confidence, with the clear intention of ending the fight without delay. His expression twists in shock as a sudden attack pierces him sideways. He quickly recovers and realizes that his opponent hid his presence by careful magic. Lightning advances in disgust as he shouts her name. Sia appears and reacts alarmed when all her talismans light up at once. He mocks his decision to return instead of running away, while Lightning internally admits that he trusted Kane's plan. Earlier, he had asked Ryu if he would take the opportunity to save the Sword God. The Sword God disappears from his position, while Sean admits that he never expected Kane to return. Kane kneels next to the Sword God as he tries to heal him. Sean provokes him, but Kane tells him that he already knows why Sean is chasing him. He appears before Sean and grabs him by the neck, while mocking the idea that Sean just wants to be Kane. He smiles as he calls himself the true absolute being. A cascade of visions floods him, showing countless possible lives where Kane was both destroyer and king. He was the absolute being in most of those dreams. He rained meteors and wielded the void itself, while triumphing with the power of creation. Remember to have forged an army of living weapons and possessed the same immortality. He descended as a god of destruction, who demanded prayers before annihilation. And now, all that overwhelming power has been concentrated on Sean. Kane feels that the authority of the Absolute returns to him, as if the power itself is recognizing its original bearer once again. Sean lashes out at his weakened power just for being around Kane. He escapes Kane's grip and jumps away. He declares that he will tear Kane to pieces before he can even take another breath. Dark creations emerge from his spell as they descend on Kane from above. Kane runs through them and wonders if this is really the extent of Sean's power. Sean smiles smugly in response, clearly unfazed. The black beasts regenerate and launch themselves again. Kane realizes that they refuse to stay dead, no matter how many times they are destroyed. Sean reveals that he granted them the principles of immortality and division, meaning that killing them only causes them to divide. The herd regroups as their numbers skyrocket out of control. Kane realizes that he is facing creation magic at its highest level, where new laws are imposed on reality itself. He calls towards to cast a spell, but she admits that she cannot seal the monsters after losing her talismans early in the fight. He tells the others to back off while he stays behind. He prepares himself, carefully avoiding actions that would cause the creatures to divide further. The wolves attack again, and Kane fails to reduce their number. Then they feel a deeper power that drives them. Remember the four fundamental energies that govern creation. Based on that knowledge, he releases a concentrated surge aimed at fracturing the enemy's runic structure at its core. As the magic collapses, buried memories resurface, and he recognizes this force as the power of creation that once belonged only to him. Sean realizes that his own creations are now being used as conduits for that stolen power, but he tells him that just as Kane has come to understand him, Sean has unknowingly begun to understand him as well. Kana admits that her mana is insufficient, and that she can only cancel her magic a limited number of times. He also realizes that unless they take care of the Sword God or force him to retreat, his chances are still slim. He reflects that the spell he used imposes death, but allows resurrection until its effect ends completely. He acknowledges that he can't erase the Sword God's death principle, but he can still bend it enough for the elixir to work. He decides that, first of all, he should take care of Sean first, but Lightning suddenly appears before him. She hands him a talisman, while he mutters in surprise. He tells her that he has finished preparing the talisman for the sealing. He recognizes the efforts of both, and points out that he will give the signal to act the instant their brand appears. One of the monsters bursts out and roars. A huge wave of darkness pours down like a collapsing wall towards Kane. He identifies the moment when the creatures divide as their weakness, and points to the small fissure that forms between them. Raising his sword, he channels energy as the light accumulates on the tip. He throws himself headlong into a concentrated dive, and cuts through the pack with a column of power. The impact detonates throughout the building. He calls towards as the remaining shadows recede and scatter around him. The talisman papers burst outward and stick to the creatures. A bright seal is formed between his hands. The barrier sits over the battlefield, while the sealing ritual is completed. Kana takes the opportunity to run out and waves briefly towards as she moves at full speed. Sean puts himself on guard while Kane goes on the attack. He makes it clear that he has no intention of letting Kane go so easily. Lightning rushes into the attack as he challenges Sean and prepares to fight back. Sean charges directly and shoots down Lightning. Sean jumps away and lunges forward again. He and Kane are running at an undeniable speed, with gritted teeth and stares. The two men run towards the sword god's body. A sudden grip catches Kane's arm in the middle of the run. Sean appears in front of him and immobilizes him, sure that the fight is already decided. His expression suddenly changes as he feels that something is wrong. Instead of fading away, Kane stays on his feet and starts to extract something from Sean. Sean's thoughts flash back to years ago, when he first awakened this overwhelming power and felt its weight. He remembers learning the truth behind him, looking at his hands as he realizes that the power was never really his. The true source of the absolute has always been Kane, and he refuses to allow the power to return to him. He clenches his fist, convinced that killing Kane is the only option he has left. The memory continues with years spent building networks and searching tirelessly, all focused on finding Kane. Back in the present, he realizes that Kane's very existence denies him to be any chance of victory. Panic sets in as he attacks to create distance, desperate to escape before more power is taken from him. A complex spell is turned on, and the space folds inward as he tries to flee by force displacement. The escape fails instantly when he is hit in the middle of transition. The sword god seems to have struck him as he reflects that life and death were never separated by clear lines. He declares that without limits, there is nothing that his sword cannot cut. Sean backs up on Sok, realizing that he was injured, even after changing his position, and decides that he should retreat. He tries to escape while acknowledging that erasing his memories was supposed to end this. Kane's eyes narrow as he looks at him. He descends from above, while condemning the thief for daring to covet his power. The others stand frozen and alarmed as they watch Kane. Terror spreads across Sean's face as he recognizes Kane's power as the true absolute. Kane announces his trial and promises a punishment worthy of every sin committed. He calmly tells Sean to get ready as the power builds up. A pillar of divine fire crashes down from the heavens and points towards Sean. The flames fall from above and transform the battlefield into a raging inferno. Kane declares that resisting him is impossible, especially when Sean is an imposter who can't even use half of Kane's true power. She squeezes his face as Sean screams and realizes that Kane is absorbing her power. When Kane lets go of him, he concludes that no matter how much he fought, this outcome was inevitable. Sean then starts laughing maniacally. He growls Kane's name and swears that claiming the absolute destiny will make him regret everything. He claims that with his power, escaping fate is impossible, as it was a curse from the very beginning. Still smiling, he insists that this will not be the end for him, and brings his hand to his head. His body disintegrates into ashes and embers, completely engulfed by the flames. Kane dismisses his last stand as a meaningless word. The flames go out as he looks to the side in silence. The battle is already fading from his thoughts. His attention wanders elsewhere, and his eyes close for a brief moment. Out of the darkness, a shadowy presence rises up and demands acceptance. The absolute form of Kane appears and tells him that they are one. He calls Kane and tempts him with the promise of absolute creation. Kane realizes that the power of creation will be his if he takes the hand of the shadow. Remember Ryan's words from earlier, that no one but himself has the ability to control such power. In a sudden flash, he reaches through the shadow, instead of taking her hand. The severed darkness recoils and asks why Kane would refuse the power. Kane admits he only borrowed that power for a moment to take down Sean. He orders the presence to disappear and condemns her as a plague to the world. Flames curl around him as he returns to the real world. The portal fades away as his allies rush to the relieved. He tells them that the absolute self has finally fallen. In the sky, Ryan observes the real world through the pond water and realizes that Kane was not consumed by his power. He smiles to himself, convinced that his own final decision was the right one. A winged woman suddenly appears and observes that Ryan's smile comes not only from his face, but from his soul. Sitting together, she reveals that she has been watching the whole time, because her soul was too vivid to ignore. The woman reflects a reckoning, where sadness, anger, joy, and regret fade into the realization that everything unfolded as it should. Rain smiles and states that he no longer has any reason to kill Kane. He gets up and tells her that he is going to give his last gift to Kane. The woman observes Rain and recognizes him as someone burdened by innumerable hidden truths. Her head turns when Ren suddenly calls her Napilan. He entrusts Kane's future to her and asks her to put him under her care when he finally reaches heaven. With an complicit smile, he confirms that this request was the only purpose for which Ryan told him everything. She assures him that she will guide Cain properly, and he nods with confident approval. In the real world, Cain lies in bed, waking up from sleep. He wakes up groggy and realizes that he must have fainted again as he gets up. He notices his belongings neatly placed on the table next to him. He approaches the mimic spanker and assures him that he is fine. He stops when he notices something else. He looks at a newly found letter with silent confusion. He sits on the bed and reads the letter prepared as a guide for the moment when he would survive the absolute being. The letter instructs him to look inside the mimic to find the last words of Ren for him. Before he can process everything, Ryu enters the room and greets him upon waking. She checks on his condition and casually reveals that he has been unconscious 4 days. As Cain reacts to the lost time, the door opens again, and Sia and the Sword God rush in feeling that he has woken up. The Sword God confirms that he doesn't seem to have anything physically wrong. The mood turns serious when he confronts Cain about how they witnessed his transformation into the absolute being. He questions Cain's connection to the renowned villain. Cain eventually explains that his sudden change was caused by a side effect of absorbing the absolute being's mana. The group reacts shocked to realize that he assumed power directly. Cain calmly admits that it is now a fundamental part of their strength and assures them that the source has disappeared. The Sword God laughs and decides not to investigate further, recognizing that Cain has his own secrets. The group expresses relief as they make multiple reports about the annihilation of Atla and the escape of the spies across the continent. Cain bows his head in gratitude for taking care of everything while he was unconscious. Ryu and the Sword God formally express their gratitude on behalf of the neighboring territories and apologize for their previous rudeness. The Sword God promises to pay the debt one day with his name and his sword. The group leaves to allow Cain to rest even more. Then he asks his chest to take out the mimic and the tablet. Cain wonders what his grandfather wanted to tell him as he activates the tablet. The system finishes loading and completely immerses it in the stored information. He is alone in a virtual space while the system recognizes him. The system announces that it will start playing the recordings left by the previous user. The scene shifts to the fourth world, and Cain is paralyzed upon recognizing his grandfather at the screening. The footage shows a failed world and a desperate attempt to prevent Cain from waking up as the absolute being. Ryan admits that Cain's blood ties and innocence as a child stopped his hand and led to the catastrophe. Ryan vows he won't hesitate next time. The vision ends in a violent explosion, sealing the recording with a chilling finality. The footage switches to another failed timeline where flames devour the earth while Cain is standing on the ruins. Ryan reflects that killing Cain as a child would only lead to another version of him appearing again. He realizes that not even taking a young life can stop the collapse, and that a different solution is needed. The scene changes to a quieter world where Ryan continues his journey in search of the truth. He admits that after countless attempts, he finally discovered 3 destinies deeply tied to Cain. The vision reveals 3 figures united by light, conviction, and light, each leading a path destined to oppose Cain. In one world, those 3 manage to reach their potential and take Cain down at the cost of everything. Although only a few survive, Ryan believes that their perseverance will eventually lead to salvation. The 99th world shows that no matter the struggle, Cain always gets up again as if fate itself had chosen him. Ryan concludes that whether they struggled desperately or did nothing at all, the world always came to the same end. He wonders if all his efforts across countless worlds were in vain. Without hope, he decides that he has only one last chance left. The system moves on to the 100th world as Ryan reflects on everything he's learned through 99 failed timelines. He decides that he has to make the best decision now. He thinks the best move left is to kill baby Cain. He convinces himself that even if another Cain shows up later, he would still be preferable. The child is agitated and crying as the sword approaches. Ryan's eyes widen and he freezes in place. He tries to convince himself not to hesitate and reminds himself of the disaster that the child can bring. As the memories of the other world surface, his thoughts resonate with the idea of having to kill the child. The weight of the other worlds presses his choice. The sword slips out of his hands and hits the ground. He turns away as doubt cracks his resolve. At that moment, Cain lay smiling on his bed, holding out his hand with the unprotected innocence of a child. Later, Ryan declared the terrible fate that awaits Cain. A younger Cain listens in silence as the prophecy expands to the destruction of every continent by his hand. Ryan addresses him gently as he approaches. Cain looks up as Ryan describes fate as something no force can really escape from. Hand in hand, Ryan leads Cain forward with the promise of forging him into someone strong. The system confirms that all stored recordings are finished and playback is turned off completely. Cain wonders if what he saw were fragments of his grandfather's 99 past lives. Doubt takes over him as he wonders if the figure stalking his dreams was really the same or just a possible future. A final notice appears, revealing that a personal message was left for him. Ryan shows up and reveals that his foresight didn't come from a prophecy, but from living through 99 futures. He explains that hiding the truth was a form of self-protection, aimed at preventing an irreversible collapse. He warns that once Cain had embraced the role of evil, there would have been no turning back. Ryan explains that he hid the truth until he was sure Cain wouldn't be evil. He is told to listen carefully, as it is revealed that the destruction of the world has already been decided by fate. Regardless of what has happened so far, the vision changes to a ruined future, where someone else takes Cain's place and dies carrying the weight of a collapsing world destined for him. Ryan urges him to become stronger and defeat the second absolute being, who will inevitably appear again. Cain hears a final affirmation of confidence as the virtual space shuts down. Back in his room, Cain reflects that the fate of a great villain and his own destiny are now inseparably linked. Quietly close your eyes and accept the weight of what has been entrusted to you. The god of the sword gathers everyone at the table and warns them to prepare, as worrying news begins to emerge from afar. It reveals that the capital of the second continent and the royal family have fallen. She jumps out of her seat as the weight of the ad hits her. The capital is now sealed by a powerful magic, and all contact with the Thunder Emperor has been abruptly cut off. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the panic begins to increase as the implications become more frightening by the second. She panics as she imagines the worst, convinced that her family should have arrived in the capital by now, and fearing that they are gone. It is back to the present when Cain tries to stabilize her and urges her to calm down. They assure him that the Beast King is not someone who would fall easily, and that his family is safer than he fears. The group plans to move quickly, which surprises towards the sword god coming with them. He hesitates and asks if the unresolved issues with the sword gate should be the priority. They tell him that there is no urgency since the absolute being is already dead and Atla has also fallen. With matters seemingly settled, the group prepares to move while already realizing that Cain is coming too. He gets emotional and offers his thanks to everyone. Later, his blimp starts flying in the sky. Cain watches as the sword god releases a powerful presence and feels that he has become much stronger. Cain then tells her that he witnessed the final battle clearly and praises the decisive blow that helped end it. He admits that he was stunned, but that he could still see it. He reflects that the blow erased all boundaries as if life and death, time and space briefly lost their meaning. The god of the sword reacts with surprise that Cain was able to comprehend such a move. He realizes that Cain had already grasped the essence of the sword and the boundary between life and death much earlier than expected. Cain insists on a clear explanation of the limit he mentioned. A sudden presence tears through the sky as the sword god identifies him as a celestial dragon. A huge blue dragon is revealed above them, flooding the air with an overwhelming mana. The girls appear alarmed as they ask if they are under attack because of the mana they felt. The god of the sword tells them that he is the heavenly dragon. The dragon then approaches his ship. Panic spreads as they realize that the dragon is right in front of them, although it does not show immediate hostility. The dragon explains his arrival as a sign of respect and pending ties with Sia's family, although his surprise at finding Cain here is clear. Looking Cain in the eyes, the dragon names him the Apostle of the Apocalypse. He wonders if he should start calling Cain a singularity now. The dragon proposes a conversation with Cain. The birds above them suddenly seem to stop. Time itself seems to stand still as the world freezes around Cain. The dragon declares Cain's transformation complete and marks him as a singular being, whose role in the apocalypse has fundamentally changed. Cain quietly realizes that the one who caused this change must have been his grandfather. The dragon admits that he cannot foresee whether this new path will become a blessing or a curse. He is preparing to act as the consequences of that uncertainty loom. A green crystal forms inside the dragon's head as the power builds up. The crystal moves towards Sia as the dragon declares his intention to watch him through her. The energy sinks into Sia as the dragon orders her to wake up. She explains that she broke the silence prematurely as Sia struggles to understand what is happening. It reveals that a heaven-blessed earth is hurtling towards destruction. The blimp is caught by swirling winds as the celestial dragon moves away. Cast a spell before leaving. The group suddenly wakes up in pain as the sudden relocation leaves everyone stranded and disoriented. They realize that they are no longer in the blimp and that the dragon moved them to another place. Lightning reacts with surprise by her conversation with the dragon, which makes her realize that not everyone could hear her. Lightning points out that dragons exist beyond human affairs and rarely interfere. His words are suspended in midair as people outside start talking about being careful with dragons. Thieves. Cain suggests they go out for now. After leaving the room, the owner of the room peeks out and wonders if he left the window open. The two walk through the town square and notice that their companions have disappeared. They evaluate the unknown continent and notice how peaceful it feels compared to the supposedly sealed second continent. Ryu stops at a busy food stall while a vendor proudly shows off his kitchen. The salesman offers them a taste, and Ryu happily asks where they are. The seller identifies the village on the second continent, surprised that they do not know them. Cain nudges Ryu while she is talking to the salesman. He tells her that they are really on the second continent as they spot Sia's family castle. Ryu recalls hearing that the village was isolated due to an abnormal mana, while the seller casually suggests that the rumors may have come from children. They both lower their voices while silently wondering what's really going on. Cain dismisses the idea of a false rumor and reveals that this information came directly from the Celestial Emperor and the Celestial Dragon. Cain is visibly worried as he wonders why no one in the city knows about the isolation. Lightning reacts with disbelief as Cain explains the possibility of a mental barrier preventing the people inside from noticing anything unusual. He explains that although a barrier of that scale is technically possible, sorcerers are too rare for it to be realistic on this continent. As they approach the city gates, the guards abruptly stop them and declare the area beyond the capital restricted. The guards insist that the region is off limits and steadfastly refuse to let them pass outside the walls of the capital. A guard mockingly questions his common sense by implying that there is nothing beyond the continent itself. Cain replies as the guard claims that leaving the capital doesn't change anything at all. With a disturbing conviction, the guard proclaims that the second continent and the world are one and the same. The statement echoes over the walls as the guards repeat the words. They begin to move silently through the trees as the guards patrol the stone walls above. The leaves whisper as attention is directed upwards. Cain extends his finger into the air as if testing something invisible on it. His hand collides with an invisible resistance as he confirms that a solid barrier is suspended in the air around him. He tells Ryu that the barrier exists even though its nature remains unclear. Cain suggests finding Sia and the sword god first, as they might know something about the barrier. They decide that their next move is to return to the village and investigate the situation properly. At a market stall, the mention of Sia's name catches the eye of a vendor. The salesman tells them she's been dead for 10 years. A small informant explains that the woman they found was probably an imposter recently taken into custody. He explains that the fake princess had broken into the castle, which led to her arrest and imprisonment by the Beast King. Cain quietly concludes that the Beast King's memories must have been altered, meaning that the supposed fake princess is probably the real Asia. The couple leaves while deciding to investigate further, raising concerns about whether they intend to rescue Asia from the castle prison. When asked how they plan to do it, Cain calmly assures him that there is no need to worry, because there is already a hidden route. He runs his fingers along the wall and locates the mechanism hidden inside the stone, revealing a stranger divine artifact. It activates it. Unlock the passage as the wall opens to reveal a hidden staircase underneath the castle. The two descend through the secret corridor, where he explains that the artifact is a divine tool capable of linking spaces, and that this hidden route was created during a past invasion from the castle 10 years ago. He dismisses her concern about the invasion and assures her that it is simply a family matter. They slip through the hidden opening, and Kane reveals that the passage connects directly to the castle's underground warehouse. They move quietly around the storage area as Kane explains that the prison is a short distance away. Their tension increases when the Beast King confronts them head-on and mistakes them for thieves. He concludes that the previous chaos involving the fake princess was simply a distraction. The Beast King takes control of the situation and orders his guards to secure the surroundings while he takes care of this alone. Kane realizes that he cannot match the Beast King's strength without relying on his mana and tries to calm the situation down. His attempts to reason is interrupted when the Beast King launches a sudden attack. The powerful blow misses its target. The Beast King shows a keen awareness and recognizes Kane's evasion. Lightning explodes because of the ambush and the unexpected hostility of the Beast King himself. The Beast King mocks them, amused that those who entered his castle without permission dare to judge him. His murderous intent skyrockets as his anger fully surfaces, making it clear that forgiveness is not an option. The heat and pressure flood the space, while his blood flows violently. It activates a technique unique to beastmen that accelerates blood circulation and amplifies their physical power. The Beast King throws a lethal blow as Kane realizes there is no room to evade. It recalls a defensive principle that allows any attack to be deflected by precise control and form. He redirects the punch with perfect timing as he prepares to stop with a circle. He turns away with a fluid movement. Then, Kane quickly launches a counterattack. The Beast King mocks and questions if Kane's skill level is really enough. He declares that piety is no longer an option for anyone who has invaded his domain. The Beast King throws a relentless flurry of punches and forces Kane to get ready. Kane realizes that he can't keep up and decides that withstanding the attacks is his only option. One punch hits cleanly, then the Beast King approaches, convinced that this exchange will be the end for Kane. A sharp warning rings out as Kane is ordered to lower his stance at the last possible moment. Lightning appears and draws a circle to block the Beast King's attack. The Beast King notices his sword and recognizes it. Red energy begins to flow from his sword. Kane makes it clear that facing the Beast King alone is not an option at this time. Lightning darts away and assures Kane that he can handle it. Ryu collides head-on with the Beast King and faces his overwhelming force, but the blow from him makes her stagger immediately. Kane realizes with amazement that he is defending himself against the Beast King, even though his fencing shouldn't work on him. Ryu stands up to face the attack of the Beast King with blood flow. Although it should have been impossible for a beastman to wield it, a violent impact erupts between them. Kane wonders if she had been hiding her true strength all along, but her answer doesn't offer a clear explanation. He admits that he doesn't quite understand it either, just that his body suddenly feels lighter and his movements. They line up instinctively. Kano watches closely and wonders if her sudden awakening is connected to the mysterious barrier surrounding the city. The Beast King notices his sword and feels something eerily familiar about it. He insists on getting answers and Ryu reveals that she was trained by the sword god. Upon hearing his master's name, the Beast King pauses in disbelief as he struggles to remember how he knew that name. He insists more and asks how his teacher is connected to his royal lineage. His gaze sharpens as he focuses on the sword in his hands, recognizing a shape that should only exist in real legend. Power surges around him as he declares that the sword is his family's lost royal sword, and demands to know how a stranger got it. Before he can respond, an overwhelming presence sweeps across the battlefield. Even the beast soldiers outside hesitate as an overwhelming pressure invades them. The sword god advances surrounded by flowing energy, calmly revealing that he did not expect the others to arrive first. The Beast King squints his eyes as irritation flares up. He recognizes the lightning force and deduces that the one who has just arrived must be his teacher. The sword god realizes that the Beast King does not recognize him. The group tenses up as the sword god studies them closely. Notice that their lack of surprise means that they already understand the situation. The sword god orders them to go ahead and rescue Tords, while he stays to take care of the Beast King. Enraged by the disdain, the Beast King's pride is shattered as his murderous intent surges outward. A crimson energy violently coils around the Beast King as he prepares to chase after them. The sword god blocks the way and exhorts the others to escape as they rush through the gate. The couple pushes the guards waiting outside as the Beast King orders them to stop them. Lightning notices that the building sounds like it's about to collapse, while Kana guesses that it must be the work of the sword god. They decide to move quickly before the damage worsens and danger sets in. An hour later, they arrive at a huge cracked wall with CIA. She guides them through the gap and assures them that only those she trusts know this place, and that it is safe. Ryu offers to look for the teacher, sure that they have found a safe place nearby. After regrouping in the cavern, the situation is calmly summarized so that everyone understands what happened. The master reflects that their survival was no accident and credits the Sky Dragon for bringing them here. The focus is on the priorities, while they agree that the barrier should be investigated next with Chizukuman. The amazement spreads when she reveals that the barrier was created by a single individual. He remembers entering the continent and witnessing the core of the barrier firsthand. A huge magical cloak formation is activated, and within its overwhelming glow, a lone human figure can be seen standing in the center. The group gathers while Ya explains that their structure follows yin and yang and the 5 elements. He points to the exact center of the formation and notices the immediate presence of mana annihilation, marking the heart of the barrier. He clarifies that the heart is where the barrier begins and is sustained. However, he only felt a single person maintaining it. Realizing the magnitude of the situation, they conclude that an exceptionally skilled individual is holding the entire barrier on his own. The god of the sword warns that such enemies specialize in escape tactics, and that searching for them inside the barrier will not be easy. It is explained that the size of the barrier allows the heart to change its location, which means that the launcher could be hidden anywhere inside it. Remember that the next step is to figure out how to locate the heart itself before making reckless moves. Neural suddenly appears at the entrance of the cave and heads towards whom he claims not to have seen in 10 years. Amazement crosses Sia's face as she wonders why Neural has appeared now. Neural points out that the princess always seems to go to the cave whenever something worries her. The princess becomes agitated and flatly denies it while Neural presses her. Neural laughs and confirms that the person in front of her is really the princess. Sia is surprised that Nell thinks it's really her, as she admits that even her own father once rejected her identity, while Nell calmly reinterprets it as grief. Nell explains that the Beast King's anger only intensified after losing the real princess. Despite everything, Nerd accepts her and chooses to believe in her. He reminds the princess of a promise made a long time ago and embraces her without hesitation. The group realizes that the spell was not broken by force, but by a trust strong enough to overcome it. Ryu comments on how rare it is to have such a friend, while the sword god jokes that she has him. Kane reflects that Ryu's sudden reaction probably came from years of isolation with only his teacher by his side. He notices that the darkness around him is scattered like starlight. Kane quietly reassures her, but the moment is interrupted by an aggressive cough. He holds onto Neural as she starts coughing violently. She rushes to heal her, but the sword god stops her and warns her that Neural's twisted mana will only make things worse. Panicking, she grabs her talisman and stands paralyzed while Nell faintly calls her. Nell slips out of his grip and falls to the ground as his name is scratched out. His scream rings out as he tries to lift Nell up. Ryu realizes that the barrier spell is the reason why his condition has become lethal. Kane's eyes widen wide when a sudden and dangerous revelation hits him. He lunges forward without hesitation, grabbing at and pulling her away from danger. The group gets ready as Nell starts to get up, and a dark pressure curls around her. Kane recognizes the swords surrounding her and realizes that they are a reflection of the ones he once wielded long ago. Anger erupts as Nell lunges forward, accusing the others of desecrating the princess's identity. She declares her lethal intent as Kane quickly appears behind her. The blow hits hard as she is intercepted in the middle of the attack and loses her balance. Kane orders her to be restrained quickly before she can recover. Later, Kane watches in silence as Neural is placed further into the cave. The group gathers outside and wonders what could have brought Neural to such a state. Cain concludes that the barrier rejected its existence, and then violently restored it. She remembers seeing shadows consume Nell inside the barrier. He then reveals that the barrier is called the Shadow World, where everything trapped inside is stripped away and reborn as hollow puppets. A momentary relief floods in when he realizes that Nell and her real family were never a part of it, and he believes that normalcy can return once the barrier falls. But Cain makes it clear that the absorbed are not imprisoned, but completely consumed. He declares that his continent has been completely erased from existence. The royal family and every resident of the continent have been used to build the society's own world. Shadows. She collapses when the weight of that reality finally crashes down on her. She collapses as the others rush to catch her. He lies unconscious as the group silently wonders what their next step should be. Cain plans to hunt down the caster and take down the barrier before dawn. He explains that the world of shadows is a ritual barrier built from innumerable formations and elements, and from that structure, he deduces where its core should be. His conclusion points to the Beast King's chamber on top of the palace as the most likely location of the heart of the barrier. Inside the chamber, a figure calls Cain with hatred. Using the final message left by Sean, he describes how he has now found a way to imprison Cain forever inside the Shadow World. Magic swirls in his fingers as he declares his intention to escape and live freely. He proclaims himself the rightful king who will rule over all creation. Cain reveals that the master of all creation is hiding in the Beast King's room on the 8th floor, guarded by shadow puppets. They identify the Beast King as the most dangerous threat among the defenders. With little time to spare, they decide to attack before the master of creation notices the assault and summons the Beast King's shadow forces. At dawn, the king's prayer ritual will not call the Beast King, which will create a brief opportunity to perform. As the ritual begins and the castle empties, Cain recognizes this moment as his best chance to attack the master of all creation. Chaos erupts when the castle is attacked, and the guards rush to stop the group. The god of the sword charges into the fray with force, breaking through the enemies without hesitation. Trusting the others, he orders them to reach the top floor, while he contains the enemy. The team runs through the corridors towards the upper levels as the battle rages behind them. Cain checks on her as she moves with quiet concentration. It seems stable at the moment despite the persistent truth. Earlier, the group discussed that the sword god and Cain separated. While the two girls stayed behind, she insists on going with them, standing up despite the concern written on everyone's faces. The sword god sternly warns that losing control of her emotions would endanger everyone, but she insists that they will need an exorcist if they are faced with a spellcaster. The sword god agrees and orders Ryu to protect Asia. As they run, Cain arms himself with courage, with the resolution that if she loses control, he will have to stop her. The group charges at full speed down the castle corridor. A glowing magic circle is suddenly activated under his feet. Dark shadows rise up around him, revealing that space itself has become a trap. Cain explains that the illusion barrier constantly pushes intruders into the void and becomes impossible to break once it is fully activated. He urgently tells him to prepare the formation of the 8 lights. She responds without hesitation and starts activating the training immediately. The formation erupts as glowing seals and winds surge together, swallowing up the surrounding shadows. Ryu looks down in shock as the shadows recede. He acknowledges that the spell he used works by absorbing mana and is much more effective than the direct shadow cleanse. Cain begins to reason that the master of creation probably expected him to take care of the illusion barrier, which makes its activation suspicious. A sudden revelation hits him, and he urgently throws his weapon at the priestess as he feels she will need it. He catches his gun in the air as the shadows twist and regroup around him. The shadows begin to envelop her. A violent surge erupts in front of them as the illusion barrier collapses inward. Ryu asks if he sacrificed himself for them, and Cain confirms it. Ryu refuses to follow Cain, while questioning how Cain could order him towards so nonchalantly to commit such a sacrifice. Cain calmly explains that sacrificing one person was the most rational option to prevent everyone from falling. He admits that the choice weighs heavily on him, promising to rescue towards from the illusion barrier once this is over. After a brief check, they confirm that she is still alive, and decide that there is no time to stop now. They rush up the stairs before a sudden impact hits them from the side. As they regain their balance, the presence of the Beast King becomes unmistakable, and time becomes critical. When they reach the 7th floor, they realize that they have come this far without finding a single shadow puppet. They move cautiously down the corridor, both restless as the atmosphere of the flat feels strange. Cain explains that the Beast King's room should be beyond this area, and warns that any traps would probably be concentrated here. From above, the couple advances down the stairs. A sudden voice takes them by surprise as he welcomes them as intruders. A woman blocks their way and declares that they cannot to allow them to continue. They instantly recognize her as Tessa, the imperial family's shield, whose defensive prowess surpasses even the god of the sword. Tessa seems uneasy when Lightning claims to know her. Then they realize that the barrier has already consumed another ally, and the situation quickly worsens. Ignoring her pleas, Tessa lunges forward in a sudden fit. Ryu jumps out of the way to dodge it. He grits his teeth as he realizes that he cannot force his way through against this opponent. She orders Cain to continue upstairs, while Cain worries about her staying behind with Tessa. Lightning clenches his weapon as he acknowledges the impossibility. The power arises as his posture enters. Convinced that she can still win, she throws herself forward in a decisive charge. Their weapons collide in a violent confrontation that shakes the room. Cain watches closely, recognizing the technique she is using from her third life. He realizes that his strength may be tied to memories and abilities from a past life, which could be the same case for him. As the fight intensifies, she urges Cain to hurry up and move on. Cain turns to the sealed doors on the top floor, leaving her behind to face Tessa alone. He walks through the door as the voice admits that he didn't expect Cain to ignore Tessa. The vast sanctuary unfolds before Cain as the enemy welcomes him into space as the ancient master of all creation. He declares himself the current ruler of all creation. Cain climbs the steps and shortens the distance. He reaches out his hand to test the barrier, immediately recognizing it as a manifestation of the power of trauma. The enemy explains that Cain's lack of mana prevents the barrier from breaking. Face to face, the enemy presumes that Cain will not be able to absorb any power within this space. Cain remains unfazed and treats the situation as an opportunity for conversation rather than a trap. The enemy smiles at how quickly Cain arrived, clearly pleased by the unexpected moment. With a theatrical gesture, he proposes to turn the confrontation into a twisted chess game. Cain admits he's in no mood for games as he takes on the enemy directly across the board. The enemy asserts control of the situation, making it clear that information comes at a cost. Cain reluctantly agrees to play, knowing that refusing would only worsen his position. The enemy starts the game casually, treating the encounter as an entertainment rather than a duel. Cain realizes that the chess board itself responds to spoken commands, turning the game into a test of power. As the pieces move, Cain questions the enemy's choice of barrier. The conversation reveals that the barrier design was intentional, meant to exploit Cain's frustration and limits. Cain connects this to how his barrier was used to reach the second continent, realizing how closely it has been studied. A chess piece shatters in the middle of the game. Cain concludes that the barrier was designed solely to prevent the enemy's power from being drained. Cain calmly advances a piece and explains that the barrier is permanently maintained. He looks up and directly reveals the real target, that the whole setup is meant to imprison him. The enemy openly laughs and confirms the plan, declaring his intention to seal the space and reign unopposed. Cain retorts that it would be easier to kill him, while the enemy admits that he does not plan to die as Sean. Cain interrupts him and calls the plan cowardly instead of smart. Cain wonders why a coward would bother with a game of chess while possible reinforcements are approaching. Leaning back confidently, the enemy dismisses all threats, while Cain claims that one person still has the power to stop him. Cain exposes the truth, accusing him of having eliminated her first because he felt cornered by Portia. The enemy argues that there is no way for the illusion to be broken by itself. With a final and decisive move, Cain declares victory as the board fractures in checkmate. The enemy reacts with surprise while assimilating it. Cain proposes another game while acknowledging the desire. The enemy of winning. He smiles smugly and deliberately withdraws his queen to make the game more fun for the enemy. Elsewhere, she lies unconscious as worried voices call her name and urge her to wake up. A familiar voice reaches her, arousing recognition as her eyes slowly open. The Beast King approaches with concern and asks him if he had a nightmare. He wakes up and sees his parents next to him and instinctively calls them. Surrounded by her family, Sia finally realizes that Nell and everyone else survived and are still with her. Overwhelmed with emotion, she clings to her mother and bursts into tears. For a brief moment, he believes that everything is as it should be and that his family is alive. She is gently led away while the family suggests going out together. And for a moment, the idea feels warm and ordinary. He is walking down the hallway when he notices something on the floor. His attention is suddenly fixed on Cain's sword. He realizes that if the sword is here, then the nightmare he remembers was never just a dream. As she looks at the people she loves, the terrifying thought forms that this peaceful world in itself may be an illusion. Cracks spread across his vision like a broken seal. Surrounded by her family, she wishes she could stay here forever and pretend that nothing is wrong. His expression hardens as he accepts that he must come back to reality and face the truth with his own hands. He hugs them all tightly and expresses his love before the inevitable separation. Even knowing that it is just an illusion, she is grateful that she was able to say goodbye. She walks forward alone and says goodbye as the dream world begins to feel unbearably silent. The chessboard goes silent while a checkmate is declared. The enemy calmly explains that he won by discarding the very power intended to guarantee victory. Cain studies the board and reflects that the result would have changed if his queen had remained. It shows how a single move by the queen would have ensured absolute victory. The enemy dismisses excuses and scoffs at the idea that defeat can be attributed to missing pieces. Cain replies that reality does not follow the rules of a board game and lost pieces can come back. The barrier fractures as he clarifies that the queen will always return. A green light rips through the living room as it descends back into the game. She stands tall, reborn in an emerald glow, declaring her return. The enemy recoils in shock as the impossible reality finally crashes down on him. Step forward and assert her authority as the princess, and the last one will inherit remaining. Energy coils around her as she decides to end it all herself without hesitation. The enemy staggers back in disbelief as the pressure of his power overwhelms him. Lightning bolts violently surge through the air as his attack is unleashed in a blinding flash. The castle trembles as waves of energy expand from the impact. When the dust settles, the pair remain impassive as their opponent struggles to get up. Laughing weakly, the enemy admits that he has also lost everything after mocking the absolute being. Before the final blow falls, Cain demands an answer as to why he chose to fight him. He tells her clearly that with Sean's memories, he thought he had a chance to defeat Cain for sure. Cain accuses him of hiding his true strength and questions how such a limited power could have allowed him to escape his seal. He presses him and insists that he simply did not have enough power to create a stronger barrier. He moves closer and demands an explanation as the enemy struggles to articulate his words. A grim memory emerges where a dark existence hovers behind him, threatening to erase him if he doesn't prove his worth. Cain asks if this fate was revealed by Sean, only to learn that the knowledge came from a deeper inner law. The enemy admits that he had no choice but to fight to survive what awaited him. He calls Cain the Apostle of the End and declares that fate has established them as natural enemies. Kai suggests that Cain accept his fate, but Cain refuses to accept a future dictated only by fate. Suddenly, she staggers and clutches her head while already approaching worried. He stabilizes and reveals the source of his strength as an all-encompassing authority that transcends everything. He gathers power in his palms while calling himself the true master of all things. Outside, the sword god fights intensely with the Beast King. The Beast King turns around confused, demanding answers as he feels that something is not right. The god of the sword calmly points out that Cain seems to have won. The Beast King's eyes widen wide from the confusion. He steps back into shock, realizing that the sword god is in front of him. Jime and wonders why this confrontation is happening now. He puts a hand to his face when he finally gets the idea that his lost memories might be coming back. He recoils in shock, realizing what he has done to him, while the sword god notices that they are turning back, new in the shadows. Tessa advances from the door and calmly explains the nature of the shadow world. The god of the sword notices her wounds and demands to know if she too was swallowed up by the same darkness. She confirms it and coldly comments that Ryu was responsible for his injuries, pointing out how his techniques resemble the Beast King's. The sword god reacts in Soka upon learning that Ryu caused the damage, while Tessa warns that time is running out for the Beast King. They agree that he deserves to be fired despite being a puppet. Tessa tells them that if she is currently on the 8th floor, he urges them to hurry up as the sword god leads the Beast King to the highest floor. An descends from the air as the two girls run towards him. The sword god appears with the Beast King when they finally find her. She is upset to find her father collapsed and barely on his feet. The Beast King reaches her gently and speaks to her warmly despite her weakened body. Sia is frozen with disbelief as she realizes that her father really knows who she is. The Beast King approaches her and confesses his love to her. His body begins to crumble into shadows right in his hands. Sia is left on her knees alone as the world is reduced to the loss she can't accept. Ryu and the sword god remain silent as their cries resonate. She collapses on the floor, overwhelmed with pain and helplessness. She tries to stabilize herself when Cain suddenly interrupts her and asks her not to cry. He gathers power in silence, determined to reject this ending and change the fate itself as the master of all creation. Cain concentrates his power and decides to overwrite a false destiny with his own truth. A pillar of light pierces through the darkness as the world begins to reset. The light intensifies and causes a complete reversal of the distorted reality. The palace is bathed in a warm light as the nightmare finally collapses. The darkness completely vanishes, and everything stolen by the shadow world is restored. Cain assures her that there is no need to grieve anymore. She clings to him, realizing that he was never as distant as he pretended to be. She smiles through tears, grateful and sure that she is a good person. Cain admits that he looks better now, but says he still has something important to do. He quietly announces that he is leaving for a short trip. Cain arrives in the dark and immediately feels that someone has been waiting for him. A shadowy figure steps forward and makes it clear that he has been watching his every move. He formally welcomes Cain by name as he emerges from behind the curtain. Cain is frozen with shock when he realizes that the presence confronting him is a woman linked to his grandfather. She invites him to sit down for a conversation, while Cain reluctantly wonders what the conversation should be about. He calmly admits that accepting all of creation means being poisoned for him, but still insists on speaking honestly. He clarifies that what he wants is not his own resurgence, but something much more deliberate. He offers Cain his power and knowledge, while shedding his personality, to make the deal easier to accept. Her condition lies in his willingness to teach her everything about this world, which makes Cain consider the tempting terms. But he rejects the offer outright, making it clear that her power isn't what he's really after. He calmly explains that embracing everything in creation would only weaken rather than empower him. He goes on to admit that knowing the whole truth would have cost him his life a long time ago. The woman responds by insisting that her knowledge is still the only way for him to survive the future. She gets closer, challenging him on whether he really thinks he can carry on without her. Cain reflects that even Sean was unaware of the threat she keeps mentioning. After a moment of reflection, Cain agrees to his terms while making his priorities clear. He warns Cain that survival depends on convincing the witch of the third continent to take his side. The palace remains silent as Cain is urgently called by name. Walking alongside Cain assures him that he is fine despite everything that happened. After meeting the master of all creation, he was back in a room in the palace. When she woke up, she reassures her that she is fine while acknowledging how difficult it must have been for her to escape the illusion barrier. But because he used a reversal magic that erased all memories of the shadow world, no one else remembered the phenomenon. To outsiders, the incident was explained as the simple dissipation of a barrier. The Beast King admits his disbelief that the savior of his continent turned out to be someone so young. He offers his gratitude and promises a suitable reward, while quietly insisting that he did not act for compensation. The Beast King, and insisted anyway, pointing out that generosity clearly runs in the family, and refusing to let him turn it down. Cain eventually accepts the reward, but explains that he is in the middle of a journey and cannot accept anything overwhelming. Sia suddenly mentions the mimic, and Cain immediately covers her mouth. Frightened by the implication, Cain hurriedly asks him to keep the mime thing a secret. Observing the development of the exchange, the queen can only react with amusement. Cain awkwardly realizes that he has been rude to the princess and tries to make things right. The Beast King calmly explains that the royal family has always been attracted to the Force, which leaves his daughter confused and restless. He gets up from his seat and declares that attraction is simply the instinct of beastmen. The Beast King's eyes sparkle as he questions Cain's true strength. He ignites her fighting spirit and openly challenges Cain to a match, betting his daughter's future on the outcome. Cain is visibly surprised as the challenge moves from a vague tension to a direct demand about his relationship with CIA. The Beast King explodes with conviction, declaring that backing up is not an option, and charging forward without hesitation. He suddenly attacks his father and causes debris to fly. Everyone panics as they worry about their king. As the dust settles, it becomes clear to the Beast King that Sia's power has increased dramatically. Her father immediately senses something strange in the mana of her headband. It connects the change to an ancient artifact that was thought lost, exposing a secret that was desperately tried to keep hidden. The hall is filled with revelation as blood, prophecy, and artifact line up to declare the rise of the Chosen One. She adds, while being pressed to explain everything she has just learned. Cain turns around, wondering if he'll be able to trick them again. Lightning suddenly bursts in urgently, screaming as she charges forward in panic. The confusion spreads when the Beast King is present, unchanged and very much alive. Cain realizes with surprise that Ryu remembers events from the Shadow World. He quietly pushes her away, asking for a moment alone away from the others. As the door closes, Ryu realizes that no one else remembers the Shadow World at all. Cain explains that neither the priestess nor the sword god remember anything beyond the moment the heavenly dragon appeared. Cain admits that she doesn't know why only they remember him, but it makes sense for the one who remembers him. He silently wonders why only Ryu still remembers the events of the Shadow World. She suggests that it might be connected to a strange dream she had. He clarifies that the dream felt less like a vision and more like an unpleasant nightmare. He downplays it and changes the subject, asking Cain a more personal question instead. He asks her to keep it a secret that she defeated Tessa, hinting at deeper ties to the swordsmanship of Sia's family. He explains that using the divine style and even the power of the bloodstream seemed completely natural to him at that moment. Cain reflects on how unnatural that sounds. He realizes that just as he once synchronized with another self, Ryu may have unconsciously done the same across the worlds. She admits that for her, a sword is just a sword. He declares his resolution to become stronger and repay his master for everything he has done, while Cain agrees and asks for secrets about the return of the continent. The two decide that they should apologize to the Beast King, while Cain ponders the deeper meaning of the words of the master of all creation. The master reiterates that Cain must get the support of the third continent, and that Ryu is key for that to happen. He then invites her to travel to the third continent, leaving her surprised and curious for the reason. Cain explains that the trip will be a valuable experience, especially since opportunities to travel with someone of his strength are rare. Ryu thinks about it and decides that if he wants to surpass his current level, this path makes sense. She accepts as they shake hands. 2 days later, preparations are underway as everyone laments that their guests have to leave before a proper farewell. The sword god explains that he must first take care of an urgent matter at the sword school, while Cain prepares for his own business. The Beast King promises a proper welcome as he bids them a gracious farewell. The group departs along the way, while farewells are exchanged from both sides. Sia stays behind to take care of the divine artifact, while silently accepting the separation. A sudden scream causes Sia's eyes to widen in alarm. Cain and Ryu wave from the car with confident smiles. Sia forces a bright farewell smile despite her persistent concern. Cain sits quietly as something invisible starts to feel wrong. A sudden pain runs through your body without warning. Ryu rushes to hold him down as he collapses. Panic spreads through the car. Sia freezes when a familiar peach aroma hits her. Her eyes widen as she calls home. Kane regains consciousness as the faint sound of the waves pulls him back from the edge of sleep. He wakes up on a wooden bed inside a small hut as lightning calmly explains how long he has been unconscious. As he looks out the window and the sea beyond, he realizes that they must have traveled while he was unconscious. Sitting down, he checks himself and responds that he feels mostly fine, despite persistent fatigue. Lightning admits that she was worried because her mana control disappeared earlier, which clearly surprises him. Kana admits that he feels dizzy, but insists that his condition is not very different from usual. A faint glow near his chest confirms that the mana is responding again inside his body. He looks down in disbelief, realizing that even a Ryu reacts with indifference, treating it as something that happens from time to time when he sleeps. Kane silently reflects that Ryu has not noticed his long manaless state and wonders if the elixirs he consumed earlier are finally taking effect. He decides to observe the situation more thoroughly, while the ship is moving steadily through the open sea. Underwater, something stirs, and a massive presence slowly comes into focus. The deck suddenly explodes as huge tentacles emerge and crash into the ship. The crew rushes in realizing that they are being attacked. Lightning panics as the ship shakes violently under his feet. Kane quickly assesses the situation and recognizes that the attack is coming from a sea monster. Ryu offers to take a look, but Kane stops her and points towards the window, revealing the monster's huge eye looking directly at them. The monster's huge eye comes into focus as it stares into Kane's presence. The monster sees it and immediately celebrates having found what he was looking for. A distant warning echoes in his mind about the places his restored mana should never go near. Sitting together on the bed, Kane presses for clarity, while Ryan hesitates before answering. Ryan points to the ocean as the most dangerous place of all. He explains that surviving the elixirs only makes the sea more deadly than anything else. Sword in hand, Kane connects the warning with the monster's presence approaching outside the ship. He confirms that his grandfather's words were not metaphorical. Kane concludes that fighting now is impossible with his current strength and with nowhere to escape to. Accepting the reality, he arms himself with courage and chooses to face the threat alongside Ryu as they make their way to the deck together. A crew member is suddenly snatched away by a massive tentacle as chaos erupts on the deck. The sea monster stands up, its limbs flailing as the sailors scatter in panic. A witch strikes back with a powerful lightning spell aimed at the monster. The monster cuts through the attack, forcing the caster to realize that her strongest spell has failed. Kane lunges and cuts straight up, cutting through the creature with a clean punch. Ryu gathers the remaining crew and tells Kane that she is taking care of them. Kane protects the injured pitcher and urges her to retire while he takes over. Kane and Ryu move in perfect synchronicity, getting ready as the sea monster rises completely in front of them. A violent surge of water crashes upwards. The water twists and forms razor-sharp currents that spiral towards them. Kane and Ryu look up just in time to recognize the attack as a barrage of water arrows. The arrows crash with an explosive impact as the pair swerve out of the way to dodge. Kane wonders if Ryu can't easily cut the arrows after his awakening. She realizes that her level of control was only available to her in the shadow world. He freezes for a moment while the situation fits. He immediately warns her of an immense attack that she barely dodges. Kane tells Ryu that the creature clinging to the helmet is much more than an ordinary monster, and that he is smart enough to carry out plans. The deck suddenly shakes under his feet. The monster curls his body around the boat. As he starts to climb, Kane assesses the situation and concludes that the boat will capsize if the monster keeps climbing. Without waiting, he grabs Lightning and prepares to act before the ship collapses. In a quick movement, he jumps out of the boat while carrying her in his arms. Kane starts running on the water, which surprises Lightning. The monster's huge eye follows him from the surface. Kane heads straight for a distant island, running over the sea as if it were dry land. Once they reach the shore, Ryu finally asks to take her down. They reevaluate their surroundings and recognize that the danger is not over yet. Ryu arms himself with courage as he assimilates the reality that they will still have to fight the monster head-on. It rolls across the sand as the monster's tentacle approaches from the sea. Kane urges her to retreat from the edge of the ocean. He asked her to buy him a few seconds, and she repeats the request in disbelief. Take a step forward to face the monster head-on. He admits that he can only know his limits by trying, and Kane confides in him for the moment. The monster roars and charges as Ryu runs straight at him without hesitation. Kane plants himself behind her, wielding his sword as he calms his breathing. The green mana curls around his sword, reminding him that control matters more than quantity. He raises his sword and refines his posture, concentrating on the skill, while his mana responds to his will. The memory of his grandfather's power overlaps with the present as Kane witnesses what true mastery looks like. Back then, Ryan had only used a pinch of mana to split the sea. Kane stabilizes his posture and forces his body to imitate the technique he saw a long time ago. He closes his eyes and reconnects with the long-forgotten feeling of using mana. The mana begins to spiral around him. Ryu throws himself into danger to buy time, while the monster attacks again. She jumps in the air, obsessed with the idea that she just needs to earn as much time as she can. He throws himself up and fixes his gaze on the creature's bright eye. The pupil contracts suddenly and falls apart before her. Within reach, it opens to reveal a set of spiraling sharp teeth that threaten to engulf her. Lightning struggles as the creature tries to crush her from the inside. Kane's voice suddenly interrupts, and he apologizes for taking longer than he thought. A piercing green ray shoots down from the monster's core and pierces its body. The explosion tears the creature apart from the inside, violently splitting it in two. Ryu's eyes widen as he stares at the sea. The ocean opens up completely, leaving a huge corridor of water open before them. Calmly, he points out that this feat is still not enough to surpass his grandfather. Suddenly, he shudders with pain and admits that he feels dizzy after trying harder than usual. She insists that he rest, if only for a moment. The monster's limbs tremble as he desperately thinks that he has to take Kane to someone important. Without warning, the monster's tentacle grabs Kane's body. The monster throws him into the water, while lightning reaches out in panic. He crashes into the water with a violent splash as she screams his name from the shore. Below the surface, his body slowly sinks into the dark water.